time I'm going, but I was quite lucky. I went around 12:15, and I met a couple of people I knew, so I jumped the queue. They allowed me to jump the queue. It was very organized. You had IEC officials walking around, checking. Security was tight. You could hear the helicopter flying above you, and you're wondering at every polling station, do you have this? And amazingly, you had, I think I couldn't count till the end of the line. That line just never stop or get shorter. It just continued and continued going on in. And the best part of it, if you're from the Overport or Musgrave or even the Sherwood community, you practically had the whole community there, even the elderly and parents with children, and they were sitting. It was like, for a moment, I thought it was Home Affairs.
Well, alhamdulillah, everybody made it a very festive atmosphere, from what I noticed as well. So that was quite interesting. And so how long did it take you?
About an hour.
An hour. Okay.
The queues were really long.
The queues were long. All right. Nazmeera, what time did you make your mark, and where about, and how was your experience?
So mine was very interesting, and I must say that this year it took a lot of effort. So I had misplaced my ID and my driver's license a couple of weeks ago, which obviously means, no ID, you can't vote. So I went to Home Affairs, but before that, I obviously had to go and get an affidavit explaining, the fact that my ID was misplaced.
Right.
Went to Home Affairs yesterday, by the way, to receive a temporary ID certificate, what they call it. Alhamdulillah, they were open from 9 in the morning till 7 at night. So they've got extended hours. In fact, I was just saying to Uncle Yunus, they're still currently open.
Yeah, up until 9 p.m. this evening.
Up until 9 p.m. So it took me 20 minutes to get my ID, my temporary ID certificate, valid for 3 months. Went through today, straight after TBR, to the Sherwood Hall at Harris Crescent. There probably were about 10 to 15 people in the queue. Right. It was fairly early. And alhamdulillah, it was brilliant. Seeing people that live in your area that you haven't seen in years, for me, was something that stood out. Everyone meeting each other, having conversations like you know them for years. When it's your first conversation, talking about the state of the country, and the fact that for them and for me as well, it's been the most interesting election, I think, that we've ever had as a democratic country.
Right.
So voted, alhamdulillah. Something that was very interesting here was a lot of people came out with Palestinian attire, Palestinian shirts, flags, wristbands, various types of Palestinian attire. And alhamdulillah, it was a very, very smooth process. Also very nice to see disabled little ones, disabled people coming through. When I say little ones, disabled kids coming through with their parents, watching them vote, watching people on wheelchairs roll themselves in, watching other people in the community help them, get in, and watching them cast their votes. And I felt, these people are doing it. There were people in the 80s and 90s coming and casting their votes with walking sticks. So what excuse do we really have not to do it?
Exactly. And like you mentioned, at the station that I was in, there was a man that had come he was assisted by some healthcare workers, perhaps his caregivers, and, wheeled out of the vehicle, taken to the front of the line. And my experience today was quite interesting and quite quick, alhamdulillah. So I decided, it was a chill day, it's a holiday, you're taking it easy. So around about 3:15 or 3:10, I was like, okay, now I'm going to go and vote. Perhaps the station would be quiet, and I would just, go through, do my thing, and come out. And so I went to the sports club in my area where the station had been set up. And lo and behold, I was wrong. There was a long queue, and I was surprised because that's where I voted in the local government elections 3 years ago, and there was like a quick in and out. So that showed me, firstly, that everyone is very, very concerned about the country. That's why there was a huge turnout. And I think recent stats or some estimates are putting it at 66%. Of course, Uncle Yunus will perhaps expound on that a bit later on. But so now I thought, okay, I looked at the line as like, okay, perhaps 100 people in the line. So I was like, do I go away and come back later on, or do I stay? So I thought to myself, wait, we got a show at 6, and it's gonna be a marathon session. So I don't have the privilege of going at 8 o'clock and even at 8:30 to try and cast my ballot. So let me brave it. How long can it take? Like it's just you get your you go through the process very quickly. You get your ballot, you make your mark, and you put you put it in the box. So it can't be that long. So I stood in the queue, and it's quite interesting, when you're standing there and then people are joining in the back and you're listening to them. And one of the common things I heard was, "Hey, you're still voting in this area, but you don't live here anymore." I was like, no, we moved to another area, but yeah, we didn't re-register and all of that. So we just came here to vote, which in different parts of Durban is not such a bad thing. So as we were going along, maybe about 5 minutes while standing in the line, there was an official that had come to each and every one of us to find out what our surname began with. Like A, B, C, like what's your surname?
And you B.
I'm B, yeah. So she said there's 2 lines, you go that side. And the line that she sent me to was a much shorter line. So I was lucky, and I was quite fortunate that, I got to, pass through very quickly. And about 20 minutes, and I was done, in and out. So I got to make my mark. And also making their mark in the polling station was a little chihuahua. There was a lady that had come with a chihuahua, so that was interesting. People bringing their pets along. I thought I'll take my son along, but he found it boring. And they did voting yesterday at his school, so he found the entire process to be a bit tedious. And he's like, "Nah, it's fine. I'm not going to come." So
I did it yesterday.
Yeah, I did it yesterday, and Jungle Gym won. So that was
my daughter. It was a braai party that won.
Yeah, the school. So that was our experience. Now we're also asking you about your experience on 060-904-1056. Right, that's 060-904-1056. Share with us your experience as to how your voting process went. I know that there have been various voice notes which have been played throughout the day, and I was quite interested, just before around about 5:30 or so as well. There were a few notes played, and it was very interesting to know how people's day went, and then how it went. Somebody from North Beach sending in their voice notes. So let us know. We'll play some of them as well, some of the important ones also. And we're doing a complete dissection of this entire process and what's to come in the next few days. And we're going to be with you right up until 10 p.m. We got some amazing guests coming up. We're going to be speaking to some of our presenters as well. We've got quite a few here in studio, and we're just keeping it as an open session for this evening. And we got the time of Isha sets in at 6:29, which is in a minute or so. So we will break for that as well. We got your Hajj update from the Holy Land, from Makkah al-Mukarramah and Madinatul Munawwara, as it is election season. It's also Hajj season, so we'll focus on that as well. We want to hear from you. We want to hear everything about elections. We want to hear about everything election related, and what is your idea or your hope for the country in the next 5 years. Alhamdulillah, because it is a democratic process that we have embarked in, alhamdulillah, and it's one that we hope to see through as well. We'll also be speaking to our famous content producer that comes on the social network, and it's quite a popular voice here, Brother Muhammad Ayaz. We'll catch up with him as well for some election synopsis also. So all that and more coming your way on this special election marathon program on Radio ALANSAAR 90.4 and 105.6. South Africa has spoken. And what is the message? Is it loud and clear? Will the people in the corridors of power be listening to the electorate? What are we likely to see happen? Post May 29th? I know lots of load shedding jokes going through as well. So is that a possibility? Is that a reality? We'll discuss all that in a bit coming up. Right now, 6:30. Let's break for the Isha Azan, and when we come back, we shall continue.
This Azan is sponsored for the Isale Sawab of Marhum Muhammad Farooq Latib and all Marhumin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them the highest abode in Jannah. Ameen.
أعزائي المستمعين، حان الآن موعد أذان العشاء لمدينة دربن وما حولها.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة والدرجة الرفيعة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته وارزقنا شفاعته يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
This dua brought to you by Simplex Radio, South Africa's leading retailer of appliances, car sound and home theater systems.
These surahs after Azan are brought to you by Amina's Wonder Spice and Wonder Dates, 9 Peters Road, Springfield, Durban.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب العقد ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس.
Having a clean, comfortable home is every homeowner's pride. That's why Khan's Chemicals have developed and manufactured prime yet affordable quality household brands Starlight, Miracle Mum, Exterminate, and Angie to care for your home and family. With a wide range of fabric softeners, dishwashing liquids, bleachers, and all-purpose cleaners, pine gels, bubble baths, and much more, Khan's Chemicals ensures your home remains our number one priority. For sales and other inquiries, call 011 933 4021. Khan's Chemicals, cleaning your home the way you want.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 7 p.m.
It's Radio ALANSAAR 90.4 to 105.6. It is now 6:37 p.m. Or 18:37. It is Straight Talk. Well, not Straight Talk. It's Straight Talk. It's school matters. It's News in Focus, and half of TBR is here as well. So we have a very big mixed masala special marathon program for you this evening, talking about elections and everything else. And I asked you for your voice notes on 0609041056, so you can send them through to me in the studio, and your WhatsApp messages. I see some like to type as well. So this one says, Salams, went to Centec College in Morningside. The IEC staff were very helpful and efficient, very organized, and we were done in half an hour. So I see Morningside had quite a few districts, a few areas there in terms of voting. I was at the sports club, and I see that there were quite a few in Livingston as well. So yeah, that's quite interesting, and lots of people participating in this process. Assalamu alaikum. It's Lutfia from Terence Park in Verulam. Our voting station is at Acacia Primary. It's been a very disappointing experience. Waiting time was 5 hours. Taken a toll on everyone, and still long queues here. Can you believe that, Brother Yunus? A person that has been on the other side of it, listening to the fact that there's been queues for 5 hours at this particular primary school in Verulam.
Yes, I was mentioned yesterday, it all depends on the category of staff that are working in these voting stations. And sometimes you get efficient staff, they're well organized because the presiding officer is quite sharp. And those above the presiding officer, the registration officers, etc., they're well organized. And they make sure that, they take cognizance of the potential large number of queues. So those voting stations, you'll find movement will be quite fast. Some of them are pretty slow, and these are the kind of problems you're going to face. And those are the voting stations that cause a delay in the counting process, because well after 9, people are still in the queue, and they finish voting perhaps after 11. So counting only starts around midnight. So we'll talk about those challenges as we go along. And with a large number of voting stations, you're going to encounter these challenges, and which causes a delay in the results eventually.
All right, yeah. Now let's talk about those results, right, which eventually will come out. But let's take a step back. Let's look at some of the trends, from previous elections. We know that this is our 6th democratic elections here in South Africa, from 1994 all the way up until 2024, 30 years of democracy. What are the trends? What have the trends been like in terms of, firstly, the turnout, the overall turnout, the voter turnout, and the percentage that the parties have gained, namely the ANC and the other opposition parties.
Well, listen, voter turnover trends from 1994 to 2019, that was 6 years, and we into the 7th edition of elections. In 1994, 22.7 million registered, and 19.7 million voted. So they were 3 million short, which wasn't too bad, 86.8% turnout, which is excellent because that was the first election and everybody was excited. And there was an overwhelming victory for the ANC. They won by a margin of about 67%. Overwhelming. 1999, surprisingly, 4.6 million less voters registered. So somewhere along the line, there was apathy. 18.1 million registered, 15.9 million voted, so there was a 4 million drop, but there was a turnout of 90%, which was quite high. 2004, 20.6 million registered, 15.6 million voted, a drop to 76.7%. So there was a huge drop from 1999 to 2004, perhaps because of voter apathy again, disappointment, challenges, maladministration, etc. 2009, registration increased to 23.1 million. I remember we were going all out to make sure a lot of people registered during that period. Votes 17.6 million, 77%, which was slightly higher than 2004. And it all depends on the effort of the people on the ground in terms of encouraging people to register. 2014, 25.3 million, there was an increase in registered voters. 18.4 million turned out, 73%, which was a drop, not a bad drop, 3%. But the significant drop was in 2019, the last election, Siraj.
Yes,
registered voters was just slightly above 26.7 million, of about 40 million that are eligible to vote. So still there's a 13 million unaccounted for. 17.4 million votes, 66%, considerable drop. Now, the 7th edition of elections, which is now 2024, indications are like 27 million registered again. We don't know what's going to be the number of people that are going to vote. Indications are that as we speak through sample studies that have gone on, it's about 66%. From feedback coming through from people, a lot of people want to vote. And the question we need to ask ourselves as a panel is, why is there so much enthusiasm this year? And I suspect, and maybe I can be corrected a couple of days down the line, that we might find voter turnout to be more than 70% this year. And I'm calling that shots, as I always do in News in Focus. So I'll be surprised if we're less than 70%. But the interesting question is, what is going to be the voter pattern? Now, you asked the question that, how has the ruling party performed? And there's been a considerable drop. I don't have the stats, but from a 67%, in 2019, we looked at about 55%. So it's about almost a 15% drop gradually from 1994. Analysts, and maybe it'll be interesting, Andre Duvanaga, what's his take? When last I interviewed him, he indicated to me that he'll be surprised if the ANC gets more than 45%. So they're going to look at a kind of a coalition of sorts. Some other experts are saying ANC should get 50% because of the Palestinian issue, etc. But time will tell us. The important question we need to ask, that people are very keen to vote, even the opposition parties, because of the concerns that have taken place since 1994 and the decline in service delivery, etc., etc. And the layman in the street wants to know that I'm paying taxes, what benefit I'm getting. I'm paying rates, what benefit I'm getting. Later on in the program, we're going to once again talk about the difference between local government service delivery and national and provincial government service delivery. When we have some time, we'll chat on that part. But indications are that the voter patterns would increase this year. And maybe we need to analyze later on in the program, why are people wanting to vote? And I know there's a lot of clips coming through. Save South Africa, Rescue South Africa, Have a Change, Stop Corruption. So there's all kinds of captions that are coming out, and we need to analyze and predict, because later on in the program, as you mentioned, we've got some experts that are going to say post-elections, what to expect, where to from there, how do we deal with the challenges? Do we rely on government? Does the private sector get involved? Do the NGOs get involved? And this is what we're all about. We've got to be active now. We cannot just sit back and say, voting has finished, elections have finished, results are out, we leave the rest to government. It doesn't work like that. So later on in the program, we're going to have some interesting discussions.
Absolutely, we certainly will, and uncover a lot of the issues as well. Right now, let's cross over to Johannesburg with our producer extraordinaire and find out what the mood and the fervor is like in Gauteng, and how did his day pan out. Brother Muhammad Ayaz, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the program.
It is a pleasure to be here on this historic day, potentially historic day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How are you doing?
So, today it was the mood was quite mellow. I expected to feel a little bit more tension, and the voting station that I voted at is extremely close to my home. So when I went there, it was really orderly, really peaceful. The vibe was good. The line was extremely long. It took forever, but I think I went at the right time. But other than that, I feel like the overall sentiment, even from scouring the headlines and looking for stories, I haven't seen any sort of major unrest or any sort of anything that is problematic or worrisome. And I think realistically, a lot of us were expecting there to be some sort of potential unrest. So, shukr, fingers crossed, knock on wood. Hopefully, we keep the same mellow level. The one thing that I have noticed is that the turnout has been exceptional everywhere. And people seem to be in high spirits and seem to be taking this election seriously.
Very seriously.
Deservedly so. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And that's what Brother Yunus had just pointed out as well, that, he predicts it going over 70%. So, who knows? It remains to be seen. But we know that we talk about stability, and of course we pray and hope that that continues. But hopefully we don't see a case whereby all the action comes in because, once the results start coming out.
Once the results are out, yeah. I think that's the thing. I think we're going to be on tenterhooks until that happens. And it's going to take a few days, so we are going to be in limbo for those couple of days. But look, at the end of the day, I feel like it's important to understand that we need to also be realistic with regards to our expectations. Whatever the outcome may be, it's going to require a lot of time, effort, and specifically it's going to require the people or the electorate of South Africa to hold the people who they have put into power accountable at all times. It's not something where we can say, well, you know what, we've got no chance, we need to give up. Because essentially, I think that level of holding your people accountable or constantly making your voice heard is what is integral in a democracy,
100%. Now, so we had many political parties vying for the vote and, trying to convince the electorate that they are the ones capable of running the country. We got the ruling party, 30 years in there, still promising, to do more should they be given a chance. And of course, they will be retaining power. Just it depends on the percentage. What is your outlook on this election and perhaps post-election? What are we likely to see happening? Once the dust settles, once the results are in, once the votes have been counted, what will South Africa be looking like?
Look, honestly, at this point, it's anyone's guess. I can make an educated guess. I think, like most people, I feel that a coalition government is probable. The problem or the fear I have with that is that historically in South Africa, we've seen coalition governments fail and almost come across as just theatrical and just non-performative. And I think the main reason for that has been, like, for example, in the city of Johannesburg, we've seen the mayor change 8 times in couple of years, and 90% of the reasons behind that was that the leaders who we've put into power are all voting from a place of ego, right, and emotion. It's never at the end of the day, we tend to forget that these people are supposed to be civil servants, right, to do what serves the interests of the people, the public. And yet that is a rare quality to find in a politician nowadays. The problem also with coalition governments is that when we have these small parties who essentially become kingmakers with their 5% or 3%, it usually requires they usually tend to leverage that for as much as they can get out of it, So it usually requires some sort of quid pro quo, whether it's putting somebody into power or putting people in positions where they have the ability to influence things that down the line have a much larger
Yeah,
impact.
but Mohammed Yaz, I got to ask you: is it not better that the smaller parties use that vote that you have given them to leverage something that could benefit you, as opposed to just going to a major party where you'll just be another number?
So what you said now is key. Something to benefit you. The problem is that 99% of the time it's usually to benefit one of the parties. So it's usually something like put our member in the minister, finance, heading the finance,
Portfolio,
something where
yeah.
it's never usually something that, oh, my constituency really is suffering because they have had no water for 6 months, and so I'm going to leverage my power in this way. That's never usually the case. But I mean, look, there have been some interesting developments today. Nothing that has been so overly blown up, but let's just talk about some of them. So we know that specifically in KwaZulu-Natal, Minister Becky Cele actually deployed a massive 17,000 police officers.
Right.
And this is like an unprecedented amount, right? But I think this was due to KZN's history. Like besides the unrest, we've also seen the province hit with a slew of factors that have really impacted it. And also, we know that KwaZulu-Natal is notorious for political assassinations. So the 17,000 police officers seem to have done their job, because I haven't heard one story out of KwaZulu-Natal that was particularly contentious.
Alhamdulillah.
Another story that really quite surprised me. So in an incident, UDM leader Bantu Holomisa, who was actually turned away from a voting station, the reasons are still unclear, but it seems there was some sort of issue with his voter registration or ID, which is kind of alarming, because I mean, Bantu Holomisa is a veteran in politics. The man is in parliament. He obviously knows these things back and front. So the fact that his registration had some sort of issue is a little bit suspicious, and the fact that it's making these headlines alludes to the fact that there's something more to the story. But I mean, we'll see as it develops. But yeah, that was quite surprising. Other than that, we have our usual. We have the president voting, obviously putting on his performative displays. Likewise with Jacob Zuma and with Julius Malema. Julius actually joined a long queue to vote, and it was a gesture that was actually quite significant, because he was basically endorsing the integrity of the IEC, right? Highlighting its role in ensuring free and fair elections, which is really important, because we can't overlook the fact that there is the possibility of once elections are out, there being calls from certain individuals, and I'm not pointing fingers in either direction, that elections were rigged or unfair, or there was interference. And I think Malema, who is probably the most polarizing of all the leaders in the country, endorsing the freeness and fairness of the elections, actually carries a fair amount of weight.
No, most certainly it does. And also on that note, he has been rather quiet of late. So perhaps, watching this election process quite eagerly, and of course the EFF being one of the major political parties, being a relatively new party, just about 10 years old or so, but taking a significant amount of the vote on a national level. So this year, what do you think it's going to be the same for the party, or are they going to be growing from strength to strength, perhaps, or perhaps just stagnating at the 10% that they did in the last election?
I definitely think they're going to be growing. I think it's important that we realize this is not the EFF's main election. Their main election is 2029. You must remember that the party is comprised of a majority of younger leaders. They are setting a course for the future. They understand also within the ANC, the biggest failure is that we have got leaders who fail, or who just basically refuse to realize when, like, oh, look, my time is up. Like we see Ibrahim Patel finally has resigned, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, but I mean, well beyond the time where she should have. Now, the EFF fully understands that by the next election, these people who have been clinging onto power and across the board are just not going to be able to continue. And then by that point, they will be established leaders that are recognized in the country. Because at the end of the day, as much as we'd like to vote based on data and logic, we do vote from a place of emotion and a place of influence from what we see with regards to marketing and headlines. And the media plays a huge part in this. And you've got people like Boysen Indlozi, and like EFF has some really dynamic leaders. The thing is, a lot of the time, the headlines go to Malema making one statement, which is usually 60 seconds of a half an hour speech that was actually quite, fair. So I think the South African public is actually really waking up to the tactics of media, and they are looking further themselves and realizing that, you know what, these narratives that are being pushed are not necessarily the case. So yeah, look, I think the EFF will possibly exceed that 10%, but like I said, their goal is not to be a dominant in this government.
It's 2029 that they look. They're keeping the eye on the prize, basically. They're keeping the eye on the prize, and that's 2029. And also the local government elections, I'm sure, when that comes about in about 2 years as well, that will also be a very telling point for the party. But yeah, 2029, it certainly is.
Siraj, I just want to come in and mention that, there's also betting going on election results. So the betting guys are on board, and Sunbet is actually running odds on sort of percentages. They released its 2024 South African national election result odds, which predict that, and you asked the question, what will the ANC get nationally? And they're saying they'll receive between 40 and 45% of the vote. The Electoral Commission of South Africa has asserted that if the voting process continues to run smoothly, which we expect it to be as we see the sort of reports coming in, it expects to release the results by Sunday, which means that within 2 or 3 days, counting should be complete. One analyst also pointed out, and a lot of people look at the negative side of the ruling party since 1994, and some pertinent points that we have to point out is that 30 years of democracy in ANC-led local government has resulted in 88.5% of South Africans live in formal dwellings. So in other words, they responded to the housing need. There's a bit of doubt whether that is true, but that's what the reports are coming through. 94.7% of South Africans have access to electricity, which is a fact, because in the pre-apartheid era, people were living in darkness in the townships. 82.4% of South Africans have piped water, which they didn't have in the past. They had to walk kilometers to get to water. 70.83% of South Africans receive sanitation services from municipalities. We know there were pit latrines and various other forms of sanitation. 66.3% of South Africans' waste is removed once a week, which is a fact in a lot of areas. Then they're saying 89% of municipal infrastructure grants is spent by all municipalities in South Africa. So what the ANC is mentioning here is that our revolutionary mission remains to achieve a better life for all. So overall, they're predicting that, to be optimistic, ANC may get 53%, DA 19%, EFF 12%, Action say 4%, MK 4%. That's nationally. Now, surprisingly, in KwaZulu-Natal, there's a surprising prediction coming through, and time will tell on Sunday whether there's a realistic that in KwaZulu-Natal they're saying that the ANC will get 11%, MK 66%, DA 3%, EFF 8%. Now, if those stats are anything to go by, it'll be a real shock, because I think, Nazmira, you asked the question, how is MK going to manage administering KZN? We'll discuss that later. But other conservative surveys reveals that MK going to get 48%, and 48% is still a sizable percentage of the KZN vote
for a new party.
Right. Now, I'm just going to read a quick report that's come through that Jacob Zuma seems to be the leading figure of MK, and he's 82 years old.
Right.
But he's got his daughter, Duduzile Zuma Zambudia, National Deputy Secretary General Arthur Zwane, MKB member Bonginkosi Kandile. Now, these were senior members of the ANC originally. But they also have other defectors from the ANC that held senior positions when Jacob Zuma was president, including the former justice person, Mkhwebeni. She was suspended. So there's a lot of people that have defected from the ANC that have got a lot of experience in politics. They have joined the MK. Now, the MK in the election strategy, they've been very covert in the electoral strategy. They were not doing things in the open. Now, when I spoke to one of the senior members of MK, just to establish that why you guys are not going helter-skelter and organizing yourself all over the place, there are a lot of posters coming through that they're doing things in a very organized fashion to get the voters to go and vote for them rather than talking too much. So it'll be interesting in the next few days to see that the results coming in from KZN in particular and Gauteng, how the percentages are going to show for the MK, because the biggest worry for the ANC is the performance of the MK in KZN.
Precisely.
And that could affect the national vote count as well. So I thought that's an interesting observation. We can probably discuss further later on in the program.
Yeah, before we do that, I just want to know, like, it's a relatively new party. It came about, I think, in December last year.
Yes.
Yeah, and to mobilize into this kind of structure and with the high predictions, of course, they're just predictions. Is it that they perhaps were given some logistical support that, maybe there's more to meet the eye here?
Yes, I think it's, when Zuma was in power and when he left, there are lots of leadership who actually joined him and no one knows about it. And he has his daughter and son who were actually working when he wasn't working. So
they were mobilizing behind the scenes.
Exactly. So we just have to wait and see. But, just looking at a school front, children as little as I would say 6 years old, they just know who's MK. Forget who's the ANC. If you ask a class, who's the president of South Africa, they will tell you Jacob Zuma. Currently, if you're an educator, especially in the government sector. So, they're already programmed that that's our ruling party and he's going to come back in power. And, he's always laughing, he's always friendly, and he's for the people. So people still want him, especially here in KZN.
Wow. Siraj, just to add to what Sumaya is saying, I'm not into music executive Dr. Baloy. I don't know, I haven't heard of him, but they say he's quite a popular guy. He's making headlines against the backdrop of his MK party remarks. As the nation prepares, he's saying he has been vocal about political matters and is not shy about making his views known. And the interesting part of his views, in a viral clip, he said that I'm voting MK because I'm not stupid. So the popularity of Jacob Zuma, is clear, but also there were issues between the ANC and Jacob Zuma.
Yes.
But the amazing thing about Jacob Zuma, that he's still a member of the ANC. Yet he's a member of MK, and he's saying, I can be a member of more than one party.
Wow.
So we need to read between the lines.
Is there coalition?
And if you heard somewhere along the line, and I'm not sure whether anyone of you all heard it, but it's a controversial point. A lot of ANC comrades are saying, this percentage is a load of rubbish. KZN, it'll be nowhere near that, but time will tell us.
Yeah, time will tell.
And must remember, people don't spread rumors until there's some kind of indication.
Yeah.
Jacob Zuma, if I remember correctly, he mentioned about a two-third majority, which is highly unlikely at the national level. Probably he's dreaming, but he'll surprise us all if he gets that in KZN. But his point of contention is, I'm a member of both parties because I'm going to now combine MK with ANC when we rule, and we'll bring the ANC back to order to control South Africa. So what he's saying is, I'm going to use MK to get the ANC back to order. So obviously the ANC disagrees with that. Zuma is disillusioned. He had all these charges against him. He believes he's been victimized. That discussion we can take on another day. But these are interesting observations that are coming through. And as analysts, we have to just keep that in mind. And this is the nature of politics. It's a very tricky game. You're going to be very organized in the way you prepare yourself for party politics, etc. And Nazmira raised the question, will MK perform? Now, if they were ex-political party activists,
ex-ANC,
they had the experience for the last 25 years. So, I mean, Jacob Zuma was president for more than a term. And he basically appointed a lot of the current MECs that are at the moment in government. So he's quite au fait with the system.
Absolutely. What's interesting, Sumaya spoke about school kids. I sat with a group of grade 4 learners last week. I would say about 50 grade 4 learners. And I asked them, I said, and the interesting part is this question was posed to them after a history lesson. So they're quite informed, based on their history lessons, which they do every single day for an hour. Who would you vote for if you were 18 years old and if you were given the opportunity? And the outcry in that classroom was MK.
Wow.
And for me, that was a very, very big surprise. And everyone had their own reasons based on what their parents say, what their grandparents say, what their transport drivers say, and what they personally feel. So there was a lot of emotion.
picking up on the mood and sentiment as to what's happening at home. Let's bring in Ayaz here. Mohammed Ayaz, is Zuma a force to be reckoned with? Are these, party predictions, there's numbers, something that can be taken seriously or perhaps with a pinch of salt?
Honestly, I think we can't underestimate the value of charisma. And Jacob Zuma he's a lot of things, but one thing you can't deny is the fact that the man is extremely charismatic. He did an interview, I think, a few days ago, and I was watching it, and I mean, he's got this level of cheekiness and a way of just kind of beating around the bush that is so smart, but also puts him in the best light. He's got I think that counts in his favor. Also, one thing that for me personally, if I had to choose between Ramaphosa and Zuma, yes, they both have their flaws. They both made huge mistakes. The difference for me is that I feel like Zuma actually understands the importance of sovereignty, and having a level of self-determination within our own country, whereas Cyril Ramaphosa, unfortunately, in my eyes, I feel like he's more than comfortable pandering to foreign allies or white monopoly capital, which is problematic. And I mean, we see it consistently. Whether or not MK will do as well as the predictions are saying, I feel like a lot of that is just hype or expectation, but that remains to be seen. My guess is as good as yours.
All right, quite interesting. I'll ask you to stay on the line there, Mohammed Ayaz. It is 6 minutes past 7 right now. We're going to take a quick ad break and we'll come back on the other side, talking more about elections 2024, unpacking all the issues and what's South Africa likely to look like, post May 29th. That's post today, inshallah. So stay tuned. It is your special election program this Wednesday evening.
Straight Talk is proudly sponsored by World of Travel.
This Eid al-Adha, donate your Qurbani with Africa Muslims Agency. We ensure that your Qurbani feeds the poor, as well as creates sustainable incomes for local farmers, brings the practice of sacrifice to villages, and shares the spirit of Eid. Sponsor in South Africa for 2,950 Rand, Afghanistan for 4,500 Rand, Syrian and Palestinian refugees for 7,300 Rand, or in many other countries around the world. Donate online at africamuslimsagency.co.za and know that your Qurbani donation goes beyond borders and expectations to create a better world.
Plan your dream holiday with the specialist, World of Travel, as we pride ourselves in offering you the best in Hajj and Umrah. We also offer travel packages to the Middle East, Far East, and many more exotic destinations. Call our professional travel consultants now on 031 20 888 or view our website www.worldoftravel.co.za. Visit us at 44 Crescent Street as memorable journeys begin with World of Travel by Irshad Malik.
Monday, Friday, 6 to 7 yes.
You're the reason my life's worth living. You're the reason I'm alive. I'd be lost without you. You're the reason that I strive. You're my destiny. You're my reverie. You're the reason that I breathe. You are all that I believe. Ilahi, 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 Mola. Ilahi, 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 Mola.
मलंग में जिंदगी की राह चल चला है खुदा एक तेरा मेरा है एक फलसफा खाना बदोश हूँ मदहोश हूँ तेरे इश्क में मैं शराबूर हूँ
Ilahi, 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 Mola. Ilahi. long I've been denying, but now I feel like I'm flying. I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. Now nothing seems impossible. With you I feel unstoppable. I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive.
Karabadoshum, madhoshum, tere ishq mein, main sharabur hu. Ilahi, 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 mola. Ilahi, 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 mola.
I'm alive, feel it. It is elections 2024. It is Radio ALANSAAR. It is Mahazain with that beautiful nasheed. And I know it's quite a firm favorite amongst the listeners of Straight Talk. And now we pass the Straight Talk time. But yeah, it is 11 minutes past 7 if you are clock watching. And it is a special election broadcast coming through to you from live and direct from the ALANSAAR studios. You in the company of Siraj Basa, Sumaya Khan, Yunus Sakur and Nazmira Kassam. And we are dissecting the elections, the process, and a whole lot more, inshallah, that we will be doing, in the coming few hours, as it is a radio marathon. We are going to be up until 10 p.m. because, as you know, on a Wednesday between 8 and 10 o'clock is the program News in Focus. And that is with Brother Yunus Sakur as well. So we've graciously taken his time. We've taken Sumaya's time. And only Nasmeen has to wake up in the morning and come early for the breakfast rush. But yeah, other than that, we're all good in that respect. So nonetheless, keep your WhatsApp messages coming through. I see that there's this one here that on Facebook, by the way, you can watch us live on Facebook. You can see Sumaya, you can see Brother Yunus over there as well. And yours truly. Mumtaz Abdul Ghani says, Salams, 2 long queues to stand for 3 hours. Gosh, where were these long queues? That is the question that we need to be asking as well. Yeah, so Saburizo is working very hard to get our political analyst on the line, Professor Andre Duvanage, who is no stranger to the airwaves of Radio ALANSAAR. So he is, currently conducting interviews with television stations. So we're going to try and do that. But whilst we're waiting for that, Sumaya, people are talking about, the long queues at polling stations. People talk about how easy it was as well. Were there any reports of disruptions at voting stations, or things going wrong perhaps?
Do you know, in the course of today, actually, I think I was kind of like, no, maybe journalists are not mentioning it, but disruption at voting stations, there were minor disruptions across the country, as election day continued, till 9 p.m. tonight. These included problems related to voting material arriving late in Johannesburg, and also disruption in Eastern Cape Province, where 5 polling stations could not open due to protest, because these guys of the Eastern Cape, they wanted the millions of rands owed to the land claim. So they were protesting outside the voting stations. And I think the other one was faulty left voters frustrated. The voting scanners were not working. So they are just minor disruptions which have been reported and made headlines.
Yeah, I see, when people have some grievance and like, okay, let's take it out on the election process. Let's just go for it and take it out. Maybe it's, it's their way of venting. Now, you spoke about kids. You and Nazmira mentioned that kids as young as 4 years old, perhaps, know this MK party. Some amongst us have voted for the MK as well. And we'll talk about that later and find out why this new kid on the block, so to speak, has gained the people's trust. But talking about the young amongst us, the young voters, what would their reason be to vote? We heard Mohammad Ayaz talking about how the EFF and other parties have an allure of young leaders. So do you think perhaps that is the motivating factor for young people to go to the polls?
Do you know, first time ever, young voters, okay, out of over the 27 million who registered voters in South Africa, 42% are under the age of 40. You call them young voters. Well, if you think about it, the key issues for young voters is jobs, unemployment rate of 33%. It's actually the highest in the world. And that's kind of a big issue with the young voters. And the next one, I think we all talk about it, corruption. Leadership has been implicated in several corruption scandals relating to influence of private business interest on government. And as a result, many young people have grown away from the ruling party. They're not afraid to voice their opinion. And the next major one, I think, a lot of our guests who attended our panels, education. Education is a major issue for the young voters. So many Black majority communities in South Africa lack adequate funding in the variety of areas, including public schools, which are still frequently understaffed and lack of the necessary school supplies, and also education. They were lied, or it's still continuing NASFAS, where bursaries were given, and a lot of the learners never received that. So they decided we are not voting for the ruling party. And also, you being so young, think about it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Think about it. When you were young, we could walk to the park, play on the streets, visit our friends. Probably if you were living in Overport, walk all the way from Sparks Road to Musgrave Center, chill at the park. Now you cannot do that, So crime is an issue. So on an average, 75% of people are murdered every day, and an increase over 60% in the past decade. Yes, this is South Africa. So from the 1.8 million, there's serious crimes reported from 2022 to 2023, and a financial year, and not forgetting car hijacking. So youth today, again, they want to act. They want to, be happy, be content. And also the one which we all of us continue go on and on. I think they get very upset when there's no Wi-Fi. It's the infrastructure. Young South Africans are looking for the next government to fix the country's infrastructure and the woes, power cuts, water cuts, and no water. And blackouts cost the country and the economy close to 51 million rand a day. Wow. So they're looking more on that. So they feel they can make a difference. It's quite good. It's actually excellent that we have young voters. That means we have been doing our jobs as educators, as leaders, encouraging the young voters to vote. And so that's quite impressive, under the age of 40.
Nazmeera, you wanted to come in here?
Okay, so look, it's an inclusive democracy, meaning that all of us as citizens should feel represented and heard. Alhamdulillah, there are millions of millennials in South Africa, young people playing a crucial role in ensuring the political structures work for all of us. With that, we have to harness the political potential of young people. We've got to promote our participation at every level. The decision-making process for us is crucial. We need to ensure that policies addressing these challenges include the views and reflect the needs of our diverse population. And yes, as the youth, we need to be progressive. It's very easy to say, I can't do anything, or to blame others around you, to sit back at home when you're having lunch or dinner with your family and complain about things that you don't have. I think we have to hold people accountable. And the only way is by starting off, firstly, you register to vote. There were a handful of people that I met today who simply did not register. And when they woke up this morning, those that were conscious were sitting in regret. Yeah, so your first step would have been to register. I feel we make time for what we feel is important to us. Secondly, doing your research. Who would be the party you would want to vote for and your reasons for that? Thirdly, most importantly, us getting up today, actually going, marking our X to be the change that we want to see. We have to firstly hold ourselves accountable, to exercise our democratic right, then hold the party that we vote for accountable. We can't sit back and expect what we want to fall on our plates. I notice a lot with the young people where we're very quick to bring up our rights. I've got the right to do this. I've got the right to education. I've got the right to food. I've got the right to shelter. What about the responsibilities that come with those rights? And Uncle Yunus, worded it beautifully earlier. You don't just vote and then sit down after that. You have to be active, being the change you want to see. You voted for them. Hold them accountable.
Siraj, just to add to what Nazmira is saying, and I spoke briefly about it yesterday, that what makes the youth of the past different from today's youth. In the past, I just want to recap. We had a lot of challenges because you couldn't vote to start off with. I mean, when I was in university, voting was completely out of the question. We lived in an apartheid era, but there were a lot of challenges. You had to go to university, not of choice, that was available for Indians. Coloureds had to go to Cape Town, to Western Cape, Africans to University of Zululand. Now, the standard of education varied. So, as a young individual matriculating, even the schools, there was segregation in education. So we had enormous challenges. And I'm saying we had to tackle those challenges head on. And if you speak to the professors and doctors who are like 65, 70 years old today, yesterday I met a neurologist who is about 65 years old, and he was just chatting briefly on how he had to, excel at school, at university. I mean, those days you had to get what we call a merit, Siraj. Now we're talking about 8 distinctions. You had to get a merit, to really
merit
get into
exemption,
University
yeah.
of KZN, because they used to take on a specific quota, and it was like the Indian portion of the university. So then other professions that were available was teaching, and you could become an accountant. There were 3 or 4 degrees that you could study, and then pharmacists, etc. So with those limitations, our people excelled the youth. Now, whilst they were at University of Durban, Westville, they were conscious about bringing democracy and doing away with racism, and similar to what's happening in Palestine. So the youth of that time had to fight this government with the 75 or 78% blacks that were completely left out. They didn't even have water. So when I read the stats, those are realistic stats. So if the NC is taking credit, I was in this space to confirm it took place. So we cannot discredit what has taken place, because the majority of the people had access to virtually nothing. So the youth of that time had to fight the government, bring in democracy. And in 1994, when democracy came in, that's when things started to happen. But those youth were now grown-ups because they fought as part of the struggle. But to come to the point that Nazmira is raising, there had to be the determination and that vision that by persevering, we're going to get there. And how did they persevere? They became members of civic structures.
Right.
You heard of Sanko. You heard of the various trade unions. I mean, COSATU and all were existent then. Those are the guys that fought for democracy, and they realized the value of freedom which was brought to the country. A lot of people had to go into Robben Island, University
Salisbury Island.
25, those that were imprisoned. For 25 or 30, Nelson Mandela, 27 years, like him, various others. So there was a great sacrifice. Coming back to today, how do we handle it? Now the youth have got the freedom. They can go to any university, they can study any course, they can go to any school. The parents have been, have got good jobs to educate them. But you know where the weakness lies? Civic activism.
Yes, you can say
now,
that
because people are going into their parents' businesses, they're going into their professions, they're forgetting about the basic needs of the community in the area. And it all starts with the ratepayer associations, with the civic structures and the political structures. When you become members of those structures, then you start getting politically conscious in addition to your education. And then you become political savvy, and you start realizing that if a particular party is not delivering, it doesn't mean if they brought democracy that I must allow them for 30 years to fail the country. We have to deal with these issues. And some of the youth are talking about this. So we got to get back to basics. And my suggestion to the youth of today, go back to the drawing board, join these civic organizations, join these ratepayer associations, start from scratch. You can build yourself up side by side with your profession to become politically active. So when you do register to vote, you know exactly how to vote, and you're not confused on the day of election. Today is an awareness day, and I'm hoping the turnout will be good. And there's a realization going to come in there that we got to be active as politicians and civic activists.
Very true to
positions.
that. Very true to what you've just mentioned. And this was something that I heard on Sumayya's show, actually, when she was interviewing Brother Ismail Vadi, who, as we know, is a stalwart within the ANC in the Gauteng region. I think, Sumayya, when you asked him, if his kids are embarking on the party political route, and he's like, no, they are very involved in civic organizations.
And that was his own children.
Yeah, his own kids.
His own children.
Yeah.
And, he said something also very important. Back in the day, I don't know whether it was the way the history lesson was taught or maybe people were confined, due to apartheid. They wanted to make a change. They had that power regardless of race, religion, everyone was mobilized together. But now you look at it, that's not happening, and he also mentioned something like, if you're looking at our religious schools, our Islamic schools, not one school has produced an activist. So what are we doing wrong when it comes to community, and being involved in other structures within your community and, region or government?
I think there's a lack of responsibility. I think that's a very big thing. We expect everything, we have the right. We feel like we are entitled.
It's a sense of entitlement.
Yes, there's a very big sense of entitlement. And if you look at, June 16 today, it's coming up very soon.
Yeah.
To the youth of today, it's just a public holiday. I just get to stay at home. There's no significance of what happened in 1976, what the youth did then with very, very, very limited, or if not no resources, to be the change they wanted to see. I don't think that we can make any excuses, because today we've got technology at our fingertips. There is nothing that we lack. Every corner has a library. I just think there's no accountability, and we need to change that. Look, too many people, and I'm going to call a spade as it is. There are too many people that are willing to sit down and do nothing. My mom or my grandmom or my great grandmom are domestic workers. They're 70 and 80 years old.
Right.
And you're relying on them to feed you. You're sitting at home, you accepting that 350 rand, and you are using it to buy whatever you want, whether it's chocolates or whether you're using it on substance abuse, whatever it is, there is no accountability. And once we bring in, I always say, discipline, we can change every factor of our lives. But without discipline, there's nothing that we can do.
Just to add a point, and I know somebody wants to come in, is when you go to the Ratepayer Association meetings, and very often I get invited because of my involvement with them, you see 20 individuals sitting off with 18 guys up, probably 60 and above, old people. And they're conscious of the need for the community. And every ward must have a ratepayer association. But you question, this is the view of the minority communities that, listen, we're well off, we got our parents' businesses, we're studying, and we don't have to get involved. But the blacks are different. They go into every ward, there's what we call branch executive committees of the different parties. And these guys are vibrant members, including in the informal settlements. So they're active, and a lot of them are young individuals from the Technicon. So they're quite political savvy, and this is why you have a huge turnout of Africans at the polls during election day. And when I mentioned yesterday that 75% of our electorate are blacks, so the split of the vote's going to be between the three big black parties, the ANC, EFF, and now the MK. And MK, as Sumaya mentioned, it just formed a couple of months ago because it was a breakaway. But these people know about the election process. They know about civic activism because they grew up in that environment. So it's not difficult for them to mobilize and form these parties. There are a lot of other small parties, but they may end up with 1%, which is one seat. Some of them may not even get a seat, and they'll even lose their deposits that they put in. And sometimes if you're contesting all the provinces, you can lose as much as 2 million rand.
Wow.
So the point I'm making is that, and you can't split the vote so badly that you end up 20,000 votes each and you don't get a seat, because that is like a lost vote to the party. So the point I'm making is it all starts with civic activism. And later on in the program, we're gonna touch on that issue, because municipal elections are coming up, and that's where the real civic involvement commences, because those service delivery issues that we were talking about, electricity, water, refuse removal, and the like, that's all local government, although they link to provincial and national government. But it's very important we get the right ward councillors appointed and the right parties in place so that service delivery improves.
Absolutely. And yes, we will uncover all those issues in a bit as well. It is coming on to 7:30 this evening, and just looking at some of your comments on Facebook, Mumtaz Khan says, stood 2 hours at Durban North just to tick off three sheets of paper that took 2 minutes to do so. Well, that's the democratic process system, Mumtaz, and that's the price we got to pay, unfortunately. But we thank you for your perseverance and, standing there in line for 2 hours. Remember, you can watch the proceedings in studio live on Radio ALANSAAR. On the Facebook page, Radio ALANSAAR, facebook.com/Radio ALANSAAR is where you can find us. You can keep your WhatsApp messages coming through. I see a few as well. We'll take it after the ad break, so keep it locked onto those dads. It is your special election program this Wednesday evening, unpacking the 2024 elections, our 6th democratic elections. And yeah, we have a dynamic panel discussing some key issues as well. So keep it locked onto those dials.
Advertising pays. Get your business on the map through advertising with Radio ALANSAAR, the station with a proven record. Let's talk to Zain of The Watch Doctor, a newcomer in the market.
I'll recommend advertising on Radio ALANSAAR for sure, as my client base has increased substantially, totally unexpected.
There you have it. Join the airwaves and take it up to another level. Call us on 031-208-1601 and ask for Fatima Shahina or Faraz Bucks, our consultants. Let your name be heard by thousands of people. Radio ALANSAAR, your partner in business.
Plan your dream holiday with the specialist, World of Travel, as we pride ourselves in offering you the best in Hajj and Umrah. We also offer travel packages to the Middle East, Far East, and many more exotic destinations. Call our professional travel consultants now on 031 20 8877 or view our website www.worldoftravel.co.za. Visit us at 44 Crescent Street as memorable journeys begin with World of Travel by Irshad Malik.
Welcome to Simplex Radio. Visit our showroom for the full range of car audio. Our TV department carries top brands with quality LED panels, full HD to Ultra HD, and now the experience of Super Ultra HD. Visit our theater rooms and transform your home with brands like Onkyo, Integra, Denon, Boston Acoustics, Yamaha, and more for quality audio visual experience. Now available, full range of home appliances. A one-stop shopping experience. Call 031-306-4029 or Kenilworth Park, 202 Brickfield Road, Overport. Simplex Radio, the name you can trust.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. أما بعد. Respected listeners, Alhamdulillah, today, with the grace of the Almighty Allah, we're en route to Badr. This is where the great battle of Badr, the first battle in the annals of Islamic history, had taken place approximately 150 kilometers away from Madinatul Munawwara. I am currently talking to you from a famous well, Bir Rawha. Bir Rawha is before Badr. Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to certain narrations, stopped at this particular location, and Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, came to this well. The Bir means well. Rawha, the well of Rawha. The water of the well was bitter, and Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam put his saliva into the well, and Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, the water became sweet. So many hujjaj, or those who go to Badr, normally pass this location and they take water from this particular well. According to certain narrations, there were 70 anbiya. There were 70 anbiya that passed, through past this particular well. Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, stayed. And he spent some time at this particular location, and Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to certain narrations, drank water from this particular well. So indeed, as we look around, desolate, these are mountains. You go back in time, this is a place we go back 1,443 years, when the great battle of Badr had taken place en route to Badr, Bir Rawha. This is one of the places where Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, stopped en route to the great battle of Badr.
Radio ALANSAAR, 24/7, 365.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Respected listeners, we en route to the Battle of Badr, approximately 80 kilometers out of Madinatul Munawwara, is a famous well called Bir Shifa, the well of Shifa. During the time of Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were some villagers living at this particular location, and when they dug a well for water to drink, they found that the water was poisonous, it was bitter, not fit for human consumption. And the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was passing by this locality, and they wanted water to drink, and the people of this locality indicated to the Nabi of Allah and to those passing by that this water is toxic, it's not fit for human consumption. The Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is mentioned that even the animals suffered as a result of the bitterness of the water, and the water was toxic. The Nabi of Allah again took his saliva, he placed it into this well, he spat into the well, and instantly Allah transformed the water from bitterness to sweetness. This was one of the miracles, the mu'ajiza that Allah had given amongst the many miracles that the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam displayed during his lifetime. And books of tariq and history are rich with information about this particular well known as Bir Shifa. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Siraj Basa on Radio ALANSAAR. Straight talk never sounded this good before.
سلمنا وأكرمنا وارزقنا وارحمنا يا مولا يا ربي سلمنا وأكرمنا وارزقنا وارحمنا يا مولا I have been searching for you for some time now. It hasn't been easy, but I'll find you somehow. I know the road is long, but if it means me getting to you, I'll sacrifice everything that comes in my way just for you, so I can find you, and be with you, and be with you. 'Cause all I ever want is to be with you, be with you, only you. Yes, you, my Mawla. Ya Rabbi sallimna wa karimna warzuqna warhamna ya Mawla. Ya Rabbi sallimna wa karimna warzuqna warhamna ya Mawla. Anta habibi, anta nuri, anta wali, anta kulli, anta habibi, anta nuri, anta wali, anta kulli. तेरी याद में डूब जाऊं मैं, तेरी रहमत का तलबगार हूँ मैं, तेरे ही घर पे आया हूँ सवाली बनके मैं, यहाँ तेरे फैले हुए हैं तेरे सामने। रब तू माफ तेरा कुर्ब आता, क्योंकि ये है मेरा दिल की तमन्ना, मेरी तमन्ना, मेरे मौला। या रब्बी सल्लिमना व करिमना سلمنا وأكرمنا وارزقنا وارحمنا يا مولا يا لقد بحثت لك بزمان طويل ليس بسهل ولكن سوف أجد لك بطريقة أو بأخرى أعرف أنني يجب السفر بعيدا هدفي في الحياة أن أكون قريب منك ومقبولا حبي لك ليس له حدود يا ربي أنت كريم والودود مولاي أنت مولاي أنت مولاي أنت مولاي يا ربي سلمنا وأكرمنا وارزقنا وارحمنا يا مولاي يا ربي سلمنا وأكرمنا وارزقنا وارحمنا يا مولاي
It's Radio ALANSAAR 90.4 to 105.6. It is your special election broadcast, a marathon broadcast, all the way from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. this evening. You in the company of myself, Siraj, Brother Yunus Sakur, Sister Sumia Khan, and Nazmira Kasim as well. And yes, we are unpacking the elections 2024 and you know what's happening. We're going to be speaking to Professor Andre Duvenage. We were supposed to get him within the last hour. He is contracted to a television station, so perhaps after 8 he will be available. We have members of the board, the executive of the ALANSAAR Foundation as well coming through, and we have you are the most important person, most important team member as well. So you can watch the show and listen to us via facebook.com/Radio ALANSAAR, and also you can have your say by sending us your voice notes and your messages. So I got this message here from Muhammad Riaz Khan. He sends the voice note and then he just adds, "Sincere apologies, brother. This was at Temple Valley Secondary in Verulam." So I think whichever school he may have mentioned, it's actually the Temple Valley Secondary in Verulam. So take a listen to this voice note.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Siraj. I hope you are well. I just heard that you had quite a pleasurable voting experience, and that's wonderful. I, on the other hand, did not have a very good experience. My mum, sister, and I got there at about 7:15. Thankfully, my mum was taken slightly ahead of us because she's over 60 years old. But my sister and I still had to wait another 2 hours before we were done. The IEC officials themselves, you could see that they were disorganized and did not have the necessary knowledge of how to do things. Okay. The other thing that I was told was that one of the IEC officials advised me that they were given tablets that had no data on it. So unfortunately, when we got there, they had to eventually go to a manual voting system, which in my mind, everything was manual anyway. And the previous voting experience that we had was much better than the one that we had today. So I'm also happy that you had a pleasurable experience. But
thank you.
Unfortunately, we cannot share the same sentiment as you.
Inshallah, hopefully it gets better, the next time. Unfortunately, not everybody has the same good experience. As I said, when I saw the crowd, I was like, should I leave? Should I go back? And I thought, how bad could it be? Let me just try and stick it out. Alhamdulillah, it went quite well. But let's look at some of the other messages before we continue, because they have been coming through as well. So we did that one. Then let's see. This one says, Salams, brother Siraj, trust you and well. I'm so relieved that I voted. Went to a school in Overport. We went around 8:30. Thought we will beat the rush, but we were wrong. The queue was absolutely long, but it was worth the wait. Now we just have to make dua that the right leader is chosen, inshallah. Ameen. Salams and duas. That comes through from Sadia. Yeah, Sadia, I waited for the afternoon. Thinking that it's going to be a lot, it's going to be a lot calmer. And I was wrong. So, Assalamu alaikum. Morningside Sports Club was where I made my mark. That's where I made my mark too. And yeah, it was a little later on, immediately after Zohar, it was around about 3 o'clock. The queue was very long. Unfortunately, we were done in less than 10 minutes due to some concessions from Mrs. Ahmed. P.S. How prepared are we to accept the outcome of the elections? Let's continue making dua for Afia, whatever the results are. Yeah. So this Mrs. Ahmed and I basically at the same station, but in a little different time. So Maya, that's the question. How prepared are we to accept the election results? I think we already kind of know what the results are. We're just looking at some of the new players on the block. Don't you think so?
Every politician is positive. That's leadership. You can't say that you're negative. Remember, you have your people. You have to mobilize together.
Right.
But with KZN, is it MK? Is it ANC? Is it IFP?
KZ. That's the thing. It adds a bit of spice. Don't you think so, Nazmira? It adds a little bit of spice in our whole process. Otherwise, it'll just be boring. We know which one party is going to win. Look at the American system, right? They have a Democrat or Republican. And by the end of the year, they're going to be going and choosing between two old men, right? Not to be ageist or anything like that. But the thing is that really a choice? That's the thing.
Look, I think this was probably the spiciest pot of biryani we have ever had, because there were so many parties on the ballot paper this year. You had to strain your eyes and look for the one that you were looking for, make sure you were putting your X in the correct places. And the interesting part is a lot of them are very similar,
Colors too.
Colors, abbreviations, very, very similar. And look, it's 10 to 8 at the moment. You've got an hour and 10 minutes. If you haven't done something,
wow, you can still vote.
It gives you a say on important issues that affect you. That's part one. From roads, recycling, education, climate change, housing, unemployment, the list goes on. It gives you the choice to vote for your local and national representative. So if you don't vote, then other people get to choose what you want, and nobody knows what you want. So you've got some time. And do what you need.
If you don't vote, don't complain, because
100%.
you had a chance.
Absolutely.
And so let's just take a quick listen to this voice note, and then we'll continue with Brother Yunus as well. We got lots to talk about in this segment of the program. Remember, on until 10 p.m. this evening, so make sure you don't go away.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Mohammed Pierce. Today I made a mark of voting at the College Vale School. Alhamdulillah, it was very fast and efficient. I feel it's important to vote, as we Muslims are a minority, and your one vote can give Muslims a voice. And instead of complaining about the current state we are in, we should all go out there and vote. Jazakallah khairan.
There you go, putting it very nicely there, Brother Mohammed Pir. Shukran for that, Brother Yunus Sakur. What do you think about Mohammed's message there?
It's very, very important. He's giving a huge reminder, and most ulama are supporting that, we should vote. It will make a difference. But with that, I always said, follow what Mufti Bayat has been saying regularly.
Yes.
Make istikhara, make duas. I gave Sumaya a dua. She's going to read probably the dua, or maybe Nazmira needs to read the dua that the government that gets appointed is fair and just, and they deliver based on the mandate given to them. I mentioned about the ANC and the deliverables, so it's not all doom and gloom. I spoke about MK and the impact. EFF, we'll talk about them later. But Chris Papas, who is the premier-elect for the Democratic Alliance, put out a breaking news pamphlet to say, last chance. Don't wake up on 30th May and regret not rescuing South Africa. The choice is between the DA and the multi-party charter for South Africa or the ANC, EFF, MK coalition of corruption. Only your vote can win it. Now, he's saying further, this is the breaking news at 6:21 p.m. this evening. He's saying, voters are turning out in record numbers to remove the ANC from power in KZN. We have never witnessed something like this. Perhaps he's maybe looking at the voting stations where he's got a huge DA support turnout, like Howick, etc. But he's not going to Kwamashu and Amlazi where the majority of people are voting either MK or the ANC. So obviously that's his perception. He says, join us at your voting station to play your part, bring in a new DA government to KZN and stay as long as needed to cast your vote. We can't do this without you. So obviously the different political parties are putting out pamphlets, are making comments which are encouraging the voters to vote, not realizing that, a lot of people are wise and they know what's happening. And as you mentioned, Siraj, that when results do come out on Sunday and we get the results of KZN, it might be a surprise. We don't know. Experts are predicting it'll be interesting in 10 minutes' time what Andre Duvanaga says, because obviously he's on the ground. He's a professor. He does critical analysis of the election trends. And when I last interviewed him, he made some very, very bold predictions. So in KZN, he did intimate that MK is going to be a significant party, but the DA is putting up a huge fight for KZN, like the Western Cape, etc. And the DA is also worried that the numbers are decreasing for them in the Western Cape, because they had some years ago a clear majority as well, and it's declining with this issue about Palestine and and the Muslim support there. But and there's another individual that's also gaining momentum in the Western Cape with other political parties as well. So it's not only the ANC and others that are influencing the appointment of political parties in the different provinces. Some provinces, they overwhelmingly supporting the ANC, like Limpopo and other provinces. So the focus of the ANC and the leadership in recent months has been in KZN. And the reason for that is they're concerned that, experts are predicting the DA got about 18%, if I read the last stats in 2019 in KZN.
Right.
And some people are predicting a further decline, because I think a few days ago we read some articles, about the people in Phoenix complaining that we voted for the DA, but we don't have houses.
And they showed them the door.
And the same in Chatsworth, and they chased John Steenhuisen, the leader, away. So people are thinking more on, can the government that I appoint deliver? So later on in the program, we're going to look at that. Where to when elections are concluded tonight at 9 p.m. And as Nazmira mentioned, you still have 1 hour and 10 minutes left. If you haven't cast your vote, go and cast. But the reminder is, of the eligible voters, over 13 million haven't registered to vote, and that is cause for concern. And that is why civic activism becomes a very important factor going forward with the municipal elections and the future national elections. So around the corner is 2 years. Important elections. Those that haven't registered to vote must be mobilized to register now so that we close the gap.
Brother Yunus, you spoke about the youth perseverance back in the day, the motivating factor that drove, the student generation of your time, and how the role that you guys played, in the political dispensation. So how can the youth, can they persevere today given all the luxuries that we have been given? And how can we get them to engage in civil society, and to encourage them to actually go and be part of it? What can be that motivating factor now?
I think the potential is there. If you look at the studio, we've got 3 youthful presenters here beside myself, the veteran, and they're all actively participating in the political discussion, which is at a high level.
Right.
So the research is being done. So the point I'm making is the potential is out there. I mean, my son sent me a whole lot of footage on political issues. He's researching it. He's got the interest, being 30 years old. So the point I'm making is that people are interested. You just need to tap them, nurture them into it. And once they get into it, they won't want to get out of it, because it's such an interesting game.
Right.
Because it actually determines the future of your country. And whether you're a minority or not, You have an interest in the country. And from a Dini perspective, as Muslims, we have to be conscious that there's a lot of positives in South Africa, unlike other parts of the world. Those that have traveled know how Islam is restricted in Europe itself. So we have to understand the importance of supporting our country, supporting the leaders, working with the leaders, being civic active at grassroots level, and then we determine what our needs are. So very important that the youth have to participate, and the potential is there. Don't underestimate the potential of our youth. They just need a bit of a nudge, and they'll start moving.
Yeah.
So to our youthful ladies, do you think that can be a thing that you can work with?
Siraj, young people, many say, are underrepresented in formal politics.
Yeah.
While this may be a mere projection of their lack, among the voters and party members. And, we need to realize that, youth engagement can lead to increased academic performance and improved the social, emotional well-being, of them and society.
Right.
It also helps our young people to build skills and, networks that are valued in the workplace, in corporate. And this can also be a source of economic mobility. I think that's the main thing, economic mobility, where accountability can also take place. So empowering young people throughout political and civic education, that's inclusive decision making and encouraging open dialogue, can foster a greater sense of responsibility and motivate them, to actively participate in shaping our country's future. That's so important. If you look at it in the bigger picture, coming out of the box.
I think there's a disinclination to activity. In other words, laziness.
Yeah.
And it's been going on for a very long time. And I think that we have the experience. And the reason I say we do is from the time you get into grade R level, we have something called class captains. If you are responsible, if you are effective, if you've got the potential and the skill, it's taught to you. And if you don't have it, then it's introduced. If you do, you brought into class captain level. So schools have this, from class captains you get prefects. From prefects, as you go into grade 7 and onwards, you've got your organizations, you've got your Muslim Students Associations, your MSA, you've got various different clubs depending on your interest, from chess to sport to poetry, etc. So it's given. It's not something that is new, because alhamdulillah we have we brought this in the Department of Education. So you have now got all of these leadership positions that you can grab. And then after all of this, you go to university. When you go to university, again, there are all of these youth leagues. You choose which one you want to tap into based on your interest. But the fundamental part here is that you yourself have to take yourself out of this comfort zone, out of this zone of disinclination to activity, put yourself into these frames, and then only can you
Jibreel asked the Nabi of Allah, "Ma ta'udduna ahl Badr?" How do you view those who had participated in the Battle of Badr amongst your companions? Nabi alayhi salam said, "They are senior in rank to my other Sahaba." So Jibreel tells the Nabi of Allah, وَكَذَلِكَ مَنْ شَهِدَ بَدْرًا مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Similarly, those angels that came to the rescue of the Muslims in the Battle of Badr, to the Sahaba in the Battle of Badr, are senior in rank to the other angels of Allah. So we are standing at that location where the Shuhada of Badr are resting. Subhanallah, Tabarakallah. It's an absolutely amazing feeling standing at this location, knowing that these great companions of Nabi alayhi salam are resting on this ground. And as I look around, I see Jabalul Malaika, the mountain of the angels, where the angels had descended to aid the Muslims in the Battle of Badr. So alhamdulillah, we visiting this great location where this battle had taken place, this great Battle of Badr. We will be going to Masjid Arish, where the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pitched up his tent and he supplicated the Almighty Allah the night that preceded the great Battle of Badr.
Straight Talk is proudly sponsored by World of Travel.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Respected listeners, we are currently at Masjid al-Arish, another historical location when we study the Battle of Badr. Masjid al-Arish is that masjid that features in the incident of Badr. I'm standing in the masjid and I'm looking at the pulpit. And this is the location where the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stationed himself. He pitched up his tent and he supplicated the Almighty Allah at this location. And he made dua. This is where Jibreel had descended. Allah Ta'ala sent down angels from the heavens to aid and assist the companions of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So indeed, a very moving moment, a historical location. And we start rewinding our history. And like I always say, that let us not look at this masjid in this year 2024. Let us go back 1,443 years when this great Battle of Badr had taken place. What a moment it must have been when the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam supplicated the Almighty Allah at this precise location. So this is Masjid al-Arish.
اللهم احفظ المسجد الأقصى من اليهود الحاقدين اللهم أعد المسجد الأقصى إلى رحاب المسلمين اللهم وطهر المسجد الأقصى من اليهود الغاصبين اللهم عليك بهم فإنهم لا يعجزونك يا قوي يا متين اللهم منزل الكتاب مجري السحاب هازم الأحزاب سريع الحساب اهزم اليهود وزلزلهم يا
Welcome to Simplex Radio. Visit our showroom for the full range of car audio. Our TV department carries top brands with quality LED panels, full HD to Ultra HD, and now the experience of Super Ultra HD. Visit our theater rooms and transform your home with brands like Onkyo, Integra, Denon, Boston Acoustics, Yamaha, and more for quality audio visual experience. Now available, full range of home appliances. A one-stop shopping experience. Call 031 306 4029 or Kenilworth Park, 202 Brickfield Road, Overport. Simplex Radio, the name you can trust.
Plan your dream holiday with the specialist, World of Travel, as we pride ourselves in offering you the best in Hajj and Umrah. We also offer travel packages to the Middle East, Far East, and many more exotic destinations. Call our professional travel consultants now on 031 20 888 or view our website www.worldoftravel.co.za. Visit us at 44 Crescent Street as memorable journeys begin with World of Travel by Irshad Malik.
Siraj Vasa on Radio ALANSAAR.
أدعو يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا بالجميع من ديوان السقا عندنا الربيع يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا بالجميع
السقا عندنا الربيع. الكرم لكم والكرم ما يضيع عند قوم انتحاموا على دينها. الكرم لكم والكرم ما يضيع عند قوم انتحاموا على دينها. يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا بالجميع عند دوام السقا عندنا الربيع. يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا بالجميع عند دوام السقا عندنا الربيع. أنتم ورد الورود أنتم رمز الصمود للعلا والصعود على نهج الجدود. أنتم ورد الورود أنتم رمز الصمود للعلا والصعود على نهج الجدود. يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا بالجميع عند دوام السقا عندنا الربيع. يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا بالجميع عند دوام السقا عندنا الربيع. يا هلا بالأسود رافعين البنود حاميين الحدود من عدو اللدود. يا هلا بالأسود رافعين البنود حاميين الحدود من عدو اللدود. يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا بالجميع عند دوام السقا عندنا الربيع. يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا بالجميع عند دوام السقا عندنا الربيع. يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا بالجميع عند دوام السقا عندنا الربيع.
खुदा ने मुझको दिया तेरी दुआओं से। माँ तेरी दुआओं से मिला है जो भी मिला। माँ तेरी दुआओं से। माँ तेरी दुआओं से। माँ तेरी दुआओं से जहाँ जहाँ
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. That particular nasheed introduces my favorite program, News in Focus, but we've combined News in Focus with the special election edition for this evening, election 2024. With me, I have presenters live on the studio with me. Siraj Basa, who is the presenter for Straight Talk. Sumaya Khan, the presenter for School Matters. And Nazmira Kasim, who's part of the Breakfast Rush. With me, I've got live in the studio also two distinguished guests, and others will follow. Brother Shabir Chauhan. Shabir is the Chief Executive Officer of Al Baraka Bank, and he's been, all over the country, all over the world. One of our special guests. Shabir, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the special election edition 2024 elections.
Thanks very much for inviting me today.
Thanks for joining us at short notice, Shabir. And I know you got a very busy schedule, but some interesting discussions we're going to have this evening. Also joining us in the studio is our station manager, Faisal MJ Suleiman. Faisal is we know he's a regular guest. Just yesterday he was interviewing a doctor and doing medical file, and he's always part of the studio. Faisal, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the special election edition 2024.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Yunus and Jazakallah for having me on your show this evening. And
No.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to the listeners.
Yes. Now, we for the first 2 hours from 6 to 8, we were discussing the voting patterns this evening, and Brother Siraj Basa, anchored that session together with Sumaya Khan and Nazmira Qasim, and we interviewed some voters who were voting. Some said it went smoothly, others said there were problems, but ultimately it was overall smooth sailing. An hour left for the voting stations to close. So those that haven't voted, they have got 45 minutes to go and vote. I'm not sure whether there are queues, but I do believe in many voting stations, there's still many queues. And we are hoping that, at 9 o'clock, most of the queues will be dealt with, failing which they'll have to deal with everybody in the queue. And even if it goes on till 11 p.m., they'll have to allow the voters to vote, after which counting will commence. Now, very important, we were chatting about the sort of expectations of voters, why they're voting in the last 2 days. We're chatting about all these issues. And at the end of the day, there were discussions around, what is the reason why, particularly Muslims, and this radio station has got a lot of Muslim listeners, that why should Muslims vote and how should we be voting? And the Palestinian issue became a very important aspect. Now, I want to bring in our guests because later on in the show, we are expecting some of our board members to join us. And we want to chat about post-election strategy, the role of NGOs, non-government organizations, and financial institutions supporting government post-elections, because I think it's become clear that government cannot do everything by itself without the involvement of civil society, without the involvement of NGOs. And the ALANSAAR Foundation and Media Network is one of the prominent NGOs, together with many large NGOs like Al-Imdad Foundation, Gift of the Givers. And we know what difference those NGOs have made to the lives of the people, not only in South Africa, but throughout the world, because we know that whenever there was a calamity in any part of the world, then the NGOs in South Africa were very quick to respond. And we know that the various organizations were on the ground, whether there's an earthquake in Turkey or Morocco, whether there's war taking place in Afghanistan, Kashmir, and now in Gaza, support is being sent out, and the various NGOs are involved. And if there's problems, like water shortages in Port Elizabeth, Kebeta, and various other places, our organizations are on the ground. And during, the floods, during the unrest, during COVID, the NGOs were very active on the ground. So I want to bring in Shabir Chauhan, because as a bank, as a financial institution, they have been very responsive to the needs of our communities out there. And later on, we're going to talk about empowerment of businesses and communities, which Shabir is very passionate about. Shabir, before we bring in that subject about what role NGOs and financial institutions will be playing in supporting government structures post-elections, I just want you to comment briefly on your take on this particular 2024 elections compared to other years, because there seemed to be an extreme enthusiasm. And when I was going through the voter trends, I discovered that everybody is reporting that there might be a large voter turnout, unlike the 66% in 2019. So perhaps you can just give me what's your take from what you've been seeing all day and hearing in the last few days.
Thanks. But before just answering the question, I think it's been a good day to go and vote. It took me about 45 minutes. Actually enjoyed the interaction, standing in the queues and engaging with people and just getting their views on the elections. Obviously not talking about which parties they're voting for, but just engaging with them. Getting to the kind of question, I think there's been a lot of awareness. Personally, I started off about a year and a half back with a number of organizations, both in KZN and in Gauteng, to talk about these elections coming up and saying, listen, as a community, what are we doing? Was involved in quite a number of discussions. Obviously, 7th of October has changed views quite significantly. But the discussion started off, as I said, about one and a half years ago. So I think it's not surprising that we go into the election period and there's been a significant number of discussions, even at work. On Monday, we arranged a meeting for all our staff members countrywide, all 300 of them, just shared some of the experiences as to why people should vote, gave them some personal experiences. And it was very rewarding today that one of the staff members came across and sent a message and said, listen, Shabir, because of your presentation on Monday to all the staff, I've decided to go and vote. I never have any intention because of a point that you made. And this comes back to the whole voter education. What point did I make? To say that although the IEC asked you to go and register over those 2 periods in November and February, you didn't have to if you were already on the voters roll. And this individual did not know that. So I'm saying if there's one individual did not know that because she probably voted 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and she hasn't changed her address, she could actually go across and vote. And it was so gratifying. And it was quite an emotional WhatsApp that I received this morning. To come back to your question about the activity, I predicted when the announcement was made about 1 million special votes were cast over the last 2 days compared to the previous period when he said it significantly increased. I actually told people around me that you're going to get a record turnout because that's an indication of what's going to happen. And I think if just prior coming onto the show, I was listening to the IEC CEO making briefings, and he indicated that the crowd that has come across and people that have voted has exceeded expectations, and therefore it's delaying some of the processes and everything else. So for me, I think it's not surprising. At the same time, with all the issues that's going on in the country, the failures that are taking place, people are becoming more conscientized. People realize that they have to become more active, and that's something that we're promoting to get people more and more active and become active citizens. I want to talk about the next set of elections, but I'm sure you got a question later, Yunus.
Yes.
So I'll probably won't go into that. But I've done some work, and I'll tell you what the plans are. So for me, I think it's great where people have come out in the numbers, and that's going to all go well. No matter what the results of the election is, it's people are taking responsibility and knowing. But at the same time, I must say it's been rather disappointing for me that when you have young people are totally complacent. I mean, I was devastated today to hear someone that I know, professional, come across and say, sorry, I haven't registered. I'm saying, what?
Yes.
You haven't registered? I mean, you got no right to complain about any issues. And for me, I think if we embark on some kind of program at some stage, it's to make sure, because I think IC will probably get people to get registered throughout the whole period. It's not just election time. We have to go out and make sure more and more people are registered. The first option is if you're not registered, you can't vote. And I think that's the case. So to answer the question in a very long way, I'm not surprised about the turnout. Going to be looking at the numbers, and I think it augurs well for the way forward because you're getting active citizenship.
Shabi, just to add to your comment about people being, having apathy, the potential number of voters should be 42 million, but 27 million registered. So 15 million of the South African population haven't registered. And it's more than 40%. So it's a serious problem. But before you came on air, we've got some of the young presenters here, and they were beginning to question us elderly guys that why were the youngsters of those days enthusiastic? And I'm not saying you belong to that clan, Shabir, but you midway between that clan, myself and Faisal were in that clan, and you in between through the three young presenters that are here. And I explained that there is potential because the fact that young people are now beginning to conscientize themselves, and it all boils down to what we're going to discuss later, the involvement of NGOs and civic organizations in conscientizing people. Faisal, before we interview Andre Duvanaga, he's coming on shortly on air, I want you to give us a bit of your experiences. I know you were up from 4 o'clock this morning. I was watching your WhatsApp messages, and you had a busy day because you had to make sure that your staff were out in the voting stations asking people questions why you came to vote, etc. Perhaps you just want to give us a quick report on what's happening to date, because this was about 45 minutes away from the voting stations closing.
Mm-hmm. I think they're going to extend the time tonight. I don't know, Shabir, what's your thoughts? Because the stations that I visited were really truly choked. They were busy, very busy, and there was a steady flow of people coming.
Listen, from my experience from running these voting stations, until the last guy in the queue is allowed to vote, the voting station won't close, and some of them close at 11 o'clock. So it goes without saying, if there's queues there, they will extend the time.
I was a little disappointed because I was less than 10 minutes at the voting station when I walked in. Because I walked in and the lady comes to me and says, "You can go into this queue." I said, "There's so many people here, so you can go there." And then I said, "But my wife's standing right at the back." I said, "Call her as well." And then I asked her, "Why are you putting me here?" I said, "No, this is for the
Elderly. Senior citizens.
Senior citizens, elderly." And then the process literally took me 5 minutes.
And you always tell me you're still youthful, but your beard gives it away.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the wife comes here.
You're young at heart. Young at heart.
Absolutely.
So you had a very short time there, but
I spoke to people outside.
Yeah. And what was your experience like being in the whole process and being at the polling station itself?
No, it was. I was very excited. I mean, it was a wonderful feeling going there, and everybody that you met they were all positive. I mean, there was this vibe there that you never felt previously. There was this great vibe. In fact, I found the vibe better now than our first 1994, our first elections. I mean, that was something else. We were all extremely excited. But today, there was a very similar, if not a better vibe. But people were positive, but everybody I spoke to, we're voting for Mr. X or Mr. Y, but we're doing it because, and not that, we're not sure who to vote for. I mean, and it was like, some of the reasons were like, but because I know the guy, etc. But important thing is that everybody was there to vote. That was, I mean, they were there to make the mark. And a lot of thought was given into this particular election because of the choice that you had and because of the uncertainty as well. So this time it wasn't just voting for a particular party. We're not voting an X there because they're going to get in. It was, we're voting for somebody because we know he's probably going to make a difference.
Right. Now, Faisal, you've been listening to various, voice notes coming in and comments coming in. And I think we discussed briefly yesterday and today the mood of the people. And today, being in the queues, it was clear when I was listening to some of the voice notes coming through and interviews coming through for some of our presenters that went out in the voting stations. And I know Eric was interviewing an African lady in one of the voting stations, asking her, "Why you here?" And she says, "I want to vote for the party that I believe can deliver." He didn't ask for the name of the party, but from we being politicians can pick up that she's going the route of MK because she wants a change. The current government hasn't delivered, and these are black people that are talking about it. And we spoke about the emergence of MK and the impact of MK and why. But very important is what Shabir mentioned. And Shabir is empowering a lot of youth in the financial sector and other sectors in empowerment projects, etc. And now there's an enthusiasm for them to be employed because we're going to talk later about the high degree of unemployment, which is in excess of 36% of those that are eligible to be employed. How do we deal with that issue and what role does NGOs play and government plays? They're supposed to be a big provider of opportunities. So we're going to unpack that a little later in the program. But on your side, Faisal, what was the vibes? Are people enthusiastic that they can now vote for a party of their choice, or they're going to make a change from what they voted in the past? How is the feedback coming from your guys on the ground?
Well, obviously, they were not willing to tell us who, and we never asked them who they're going to be voting for. But looking at the body language, many of them, as I told you, are making changes. I mean, if they voted for a particular party previously, they now say we're not voting for this party because of A, B, and C. But now we're not going to vote for the alternate party because of EF and because of
not EFF,
not EFF, definitely not. No, DENF, DENF. So they had their reasons not to vote. That's why they had to look at the smaller parties, and then when it came to smaller parties, again, there were several parties they could vote for. So it was something that was well thought about. It wasn't something we're just going to make across.
Faisal, I want to disrupt you. We've got Andre Duvanage on the line. He's been very busy all day. Professor Andre Duvanage, good evening and welcome to the special edition of Elections 2024 live on Radio ALANSAAR International.
Good evening. Nice talking to you. You are right. We are very busy running around here at the Midrand, the headquarters of the IEC. A lot of activity going on, but I am prepared to talk to you. We can talk, sir.
Yes, Andre. I'm not going to take too much of your time. I know you're very busy and you're going to be busy to early hours of the morning. I know your role. But, we were looking and discussing voter turnout and discussing election trends in the last couple of years. And we discovered in 2019, the turnout was 66%, which was very low compared to prior years. But from feedback we're getting on the ground from the different voting stations and the different provinces, there seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm, and we in the studio are beginning to get the feeling that we may exceed 70% of voter turnout this particular election. What's your take on the ground, Andre?
Well, we receive feedback from the IEC head, and he has the same enthusiasm that they can reach the 70% mark. And my only take on it is possible, but we need to take into consideration in 2019, there were just over 24 million voters. This time, we are close to 27 million voters. So an additional 3 million people must vote in order to get the same percentage. And secondly, we must take into consideration that the process is taking a lot longer because we are now making 3 crosses on 3 papers, while it was different in the past with only 2 marks, a provincial one and a national one. So we need to take these factors into consideration. I receive feedback from people in the Gauteng area arguing to the opposite, that the turnout of voters was not that high as they expected. But they said in the suburb areas of Gauteng, it was extremely high. So I think it's a bit of a mix of things, but I think the more correct scenario is that we can expect a higher outcome. And what is also positive is that with a minor exception here and there, which we can expect, the election went logistically relatively good. And that is a good sign. And that's also an indication that people was prepared to vote. There was not a lot of conflict and violence, and this will also contribute to a high voter turnout.
Well, listen, surprisingly, this is contrary to the fact that lots of political parties expected some problems with the new parties emerging, etc., etc. So, which is good because everybody is giving the other an opportunity to vote. Well, Prof, I just wanted to raise one issue that we've been discussing at our studio for quite a while. Is the issue of those that are eligible to vote, which is plus minus 42 million, and only 27 million registered to vote, and there's a huge gap. In your opinion, is there any particular reason why people are reluctant to register to vote?
Well, the official number that should have been registered, that aren't registered, is 13 million.
Yes.
Now, if you take into consideration, I think the 2019 election, the total voter outcome was something like between 18 and 19 million. So it gives us an idea of how big that group is and what the potential impact of that group could be. But the reasons, I believe, is diverse. But in essence, it is people that have lost interest in politics. They are disgruntled with the existing system, believe that the system won't deliver. It is like the category we got with unemployment. You have the smaller definition, people applying for jobs, not getting it. But then you get the bigger definition, and that is people that are also unemployed, but they are not actively working in order to get a job. So that is a pattern we have within society, and that has a lot to do with the approach of the government. We have an ANC government that is 30 years in control. It is typically of a one-party tendency over a very long term. And South Africa is not unique in this regard. We have seen the same patterns in many of the countries where freedom movements took over. Zimbabwe is the first example that is coming up, but it's also true to Frelimo and in Mozambique, and the same is applicable to the MPLA in Angola. So that is a pattern we are seeing in one-party dominant systems, although they may be democratic.
Now, Prof, interesting stats we went through earlier. In 1994, when the ANC won the elections, plus minus 67% turnout voting they got. 2019, it dropped to about 57%, which is a 10% decline. Now, you and I spoke about our projections going forward. We know that if everything goes according to plan and the IEC does have a smooth, completion of the election process, by Sunday we should be getting results coming in. There's a lot of projections coming in from political analysts and survey companies. And I read one out more recently where KZN, I'll come back to you shortly on the KZN scenario, but nationally, I think you mentioned last time, your projection, the ANC will be the majority and the numbers are between 43 and 45. Are you still optimistic the ANC will get that, or you expect it to be at a lower range?
No, my latest take on the situation is with a high voter percentage and with the ability to change uncertain voters, the ANC can take it to a level of 47, 48% as a best case scenario. But then the expectation must be that the MK party is not going to do well. They will probably get 5% or even lower. Dependent on what the MK party may do will decide how far the ANC will get. My view at the moment is that the best case scenario for the ANC, 47 to 48, and then the worst case, it can go down to 42%. Now, somewhere in between, probably a bit higher. If I look at the previous tradition, I would go at the moment for 45, 46%, if I must give an exact figure, but it is dependent on factors like what is going on with the uncertain voters, the voting percentage, and then the role of new parties.
You heard the Prof talking about 46%, what he's putting his mark on that. But I think let's just wait until the official figures come in.
Siraj, you want to come in?
Absolutely. Mr. Chauhan, coming from the private sector, the financial sector as well. Given the current economic outlook that the country is facing, perhaps, with the policies of the current administration or maladministration, should we say, is there any optimism, come today, post May 29th, in a new administration, perhaps any changes that, you would like to see happen and perhaps, something that could benefit the country as a whole?
I think when you look at it, there's quite a lot of positive issues that the government has been doing. If you have a look at certain departments, they've been doing fantastic work. As much as people look at SARS and they take away our taxes and whatever the case is, I mean, they've been absolutely brilliant, and the measures that they're putting in is very positive in terms of collecting income, etc. The second department is the Department of Finance. If you have a look at the way they're structured, I think it's world class. From the budgeting process, from recently they've issued an Islamic bond, which is a sukuk for some 20 billion. If you look at the professionalism, the way they do things, etc., I think that's quite great. I think on other areas, if you have a look at the Department of Trade and Industry, I think we've heard that Minister Ibrahim Patel is no longer going to be in that position. There's someone else coming in. Maybe we need change because there's been some kind of criticisms at the pace at which things have come across. But I think very importantly, when it comes to things like job creation, the Department of Labor, etc., I think we need more reforms taking place out there. Not so much that we don't have the policies, it's the implementation that's so poor, it's actually quite frightening. I think in engaging with these departments, sometimes you have analysis paralysis. They spend so much of time on having strategic discussions, etc.
Right.
When it comes to the implementation side, they're very poor at that. And for me, I'm hoping that those issues can change going forward.
All right. Hopefully, we'll see some change on that front. Right now, we are joined once again by Professor Andre Duvenage. Unfortunately, we lost the connection there, and Yunus, you can take over from there.
Andre, welcome back. Our apologies for losing the line date. I'm sure it wasn't load shedding; it must be a technical problem. Andre, you were on the air talking about those percentages, etc. Perhaps you can continue.
Yes, my take on it is ANC between 42 to 47%. Looking at the DA, I'm talking about 21, 23, maybe 24%. Looking at the EFF, and both the EFF and the ANC support is very much dependent on what happened to the MK party. But currently I'm looking at 10 to 12%. But then the MK party is the uncertain one. If the MK party is going above 10%, then it's going to create a real crisis for the ANC, forcing them down on the lines towards my more worst case scenario. And it will also impact negatively on the EFF, taking them to about a 10% level. If we talk about the other parties, IFP, and I'm now only busy with the national level, 4% towards 5-6%. If we look at the smaller parties, Freedom Front Plus 2%, Action South Africa around 2%, and then the smaller parties below 1%, Patriotic Alliance, the Good Party, and so on, maybe even only as much as 0.5%. But then when we come to the provincial level...
Yes, that's the one we're interested in, the one in KZN, Andre. There were some interesting stats coming through. Perhaps you can just express yourself on those stats.
I haven't seen the newest the Social Research Foundation one, but I have seen the ENCA one. And there the level of the MK party was at 44%. And going down, the second biggest party, and that was about 50% lower, around 20%, was the IFP, then the DA, and the ANC only coming out with about 10 or 11%.
Now, how reliable are these? Is this information, Andre? Is it quite reliable?
I am not. For me, it is a bit of a distorted picture, and I am not that sure that that is accurate. But what I can say is that the methodology they use, as well as the number of people involved, is giving us the indication that there is merit in this approach. And what is interesting is that it is supported by some of the other surveys, maybe not to the extent of 44%, but other surveys also indicated that the MK party may end up on top. And this is bringing up a scenario that is concerning, and that is, may we end up in a scenario where the MK party, together with the EFF. I understand there's close relations between them in KZN, and maybe a third party will take over the government. And to me, it's not impossible that the third party may be the IFP. And then we have a very strange makeup in KZN, which I believe can become potentially unstable. The other coalition environment that's also interesting and problematic is Gauteng, where the ANC is around 40%. And they may, with the support of the EFF and some smaller parties, create an absolute majority. So that is the other scenario. And then the third one is the Western Cape. Now, I think the Western Cape may go DA's way in the absolute majority, a close call, but 50+1. But it can also end up below 50, and they will need the support of some other parties like the Freedom Front Plus. And then, interestingly, the Northern Cape. We may see a scenario where the ANC get about 50%, and the rest of all the opposition parties 50%. In the Free State, I'm expecting a small majority for the ANC. In Mpumalanga, the MK party has built on the support in Mpumalanga, but I still believe the ANC will do it there. When it comes to Limpopo, the ANC will easily win, also in the Eastern Cape. And the Northwest Province, maybe with a lower majority, but still a safe majority for the ANC in the Northwest Province. That is about my assessment, and I have not seen anything contrary to this perspective, but I believe tomorrow, this time, we will have a better indication of what may happen. But I'm still of the belief that we are entering a phase of coalition politics, which have the potential of becoming a lot more unstable in certain environments. But I'm positive about the election today, what happened, minor problems here and there that can be expected if you talk about more than 22,000 voting points. So I'm relatively positive that we are going to reach an outcome that may be accepted as free and fair. Normally, there's always cases after an election, but hopefully this is of a smaller operational type and not fundamental in nature.
One final question, Andre. Listening to you carefully on the different scenarios we've got, and Sunday will be a clear indication. We hope there's not going to be surprises further, because some of the stats coming through on KZN is quite frightening. They're talking about the MK getting 65%, but let's see what happens. There could be particular reasons why MK and KZN is very strong, the Jacob Zuma factor and other factors, the defectors from the ANC, etc. Now, you mentioned that Western Cape and KZN may be run by a coalition, but Western Cape will be clear-cut DA. KZN could have a coalition with MK and others, and then there's three other provinces they could be hung. So how would this affect the ANC nationally when this scenario takes place? Because it'll be unusual compared to the other years of elections, Andre.
Yes, maybe before I answer that straightforward, I must tell you about the conversation I had with the MK member here, and he was absolutely convinced that the MK party is going to achieve a 2/3 majority.
Nationally, is that?
And that is, and I am 100% sure that is incorrect, but the level of confidence that the guy had frightened me in a way, telling me that there may be something in the political environment we as political analysts can miss. And I'm not excluding the possibility that the MK party can do better than expected. But then the big question will still be, it's easy to get the popular support. It's more difficult to deliver the votes on election day. Can they deliver that votes?
Well,
now the question about...
Andre, I was just mentioning, and what crossed my mind is that, come Sunday, if that happens, it could be the shock of the century. but not impossible. What happened last year when Liverpool thrashed Man United 7-0 and the experts expected a 1-1 draw. So things can happen, but as you said, highly unlikely. You can continue, Andre.
Just a reaction on what you said. We are living in times of change, and things can change in a very, very radical way.
Right.
And I am sure that we are at the time of what I like to call tipping point politics, where these type of things can happen. But if I must give my objective perspective, I'm rather seeing the MK party between 5%, and if I stretch my imagination, I will go up to a 12%, but rather closer to 10%. But this brings us to the topic of coalition politics, and I would like to differentiate between two types of government here. The one is a change that implicate a new government, and to a certain extent a new regime, and that is the potential for KZN if the MK party is going to win by a big margin and establishing a coalition. It's no more ANC government. I am sure that the MK party is going to fight the ANC on certain levels if they have a very strong majority. That is the first point. The other one, if you look at the DA, it's only going to be a minor adjustment to bring in the Freedom Front Plus and to work with them and maybe another party and establish a majority. The same to the Northern Cape. I think the Northern Cape ANC will have close to 50 in a worst case scenario, and they will only need the support of a smaller party of two patriotic alliance. Maybe they go the way of the EFF and so on, and create then a small coalition government. Gauteng may be a bit more difficult because it's a 40% scenario for the ANC. They need a strategic partner. The two strategic partners at this point seems to be the EFF or the DA. Their coalition with the EFF didn't work in Ekurhuleni. It was problematic. And I'm not reading the DA into a picture. If we go into the DA, we are talking about a government of national unity, which to me is an extended, bigger coalition than just an ordinary coalition to achieve a majority. So I think in some cases it will be a smaller change, but when it comes to KZN, I think we are going to see a much more dynamic situation developing there. And we know that of all the provinces, the potential for conflict and violence is the highest in KZN. So I must tell you, I am a bit concerned about the potential scenario that may play out in KZN, and especially if the MK party is going to achieve the position of the biggest and strongest party.
Thank you very much, Andre, for those interesting comments and keeping us up to date with your predictions. We'll catch up with you later in the week to see how accurate you were. I know you got a busy evening ahead, but definitely there's a lot more to discuss, and we'll catch up with you later on the week. Good evening and have a pleasant evening. Enjoy the counting into the early hours of the morning, and let's see how it goes in the next few days. Good evening, Andre.
Thank you very much.
That brings us to a short break with this long interview we had, and inshallah, we'll continue our discussion after the break.
Would you like to give Sadaqah 365 days a year? You can with the Al-Imdad Foundation's Daily Sadaqah program. Donate as little as R1 a day for a month for each member of your family, up to any specified amount, and receive monthly feedback on where your contributions have made a difference. Visit alimdad.com and download your daily Sadaqah debit order form or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
For all your Umrah attire, Zamzam water, fresh stock of dates at a ridiculously low price is now available at the ALANSAAR Book and Media Shop at 207 West Road, Overport.
Plan your dream holiday with the specialist, World of Travel, as we pride ourselves in offering you the best in Hajj and Umrah. We also offer travel packages to the Middle East, Far East, and many more exotic destinations. Call our professional travel consultants now on 031 20 8888 or view our website www.worldoftravel.co.za. Visit us at 44 Crescent Street as memorable journeys begin with World of Travel by Irshad Malik.
खुदा ने मुझको दिया माँ तेरी दुआओं से, माँ तेरी दुआओं से मिला है जो भी मिला माँ तेरी दुआओं से, माँ तेरी दुआओं से, माँ तेरी दुआओं से जहाँ जहाँ भी गया लोग दिल बिछाने लगे, जहाँ जहाँ भी गया लोग दिल बिछाने लगे, ये है तेरा मेरा माँ तेरी दुआओं से, तेरी
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's Mari Mukwanda, also known as Means the Presenter. I went out to make my mark and cast my vote at the elections, and I am very happy that I did so. By judging at the looks of the queues, they were very long. I mean, I stood there for almost an hour before I could get in. And by the time I left, the queue was even longer than it was when I got there the first time. So it shows that people are ready for change. It shows that people want change. People do not want to be led by the same government that have been leading us for the past years. So, and many young faces as well, young and old. So it was good to see all young and old there. It's very important to vote, not just for change, but also for our voices to be heard. And we are living in a genocide with Sudan, Congo, and Palestine, and all the other ongoing problems in the world. And it starts with us. We are the voices of change and the voices of reason. If we remain silent, then we are not going to get the change that we so want and the change that we speak highly of. With a few hours left to go, those who haven't voted yet, please go out and cast your vote. But also, you can go and get some freebies. Yeah, so if you are one of those people who want to get yourself something free, you can go to Wimpy and get a coffee or a hot chocolate. All right. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Muhammad Pierce. Today I made my mark of voting at the College Vale.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm Razeen Dada. I voted in Musgrave today, and I've actually been driving around a lot of the voting stations, and it's absolutely unreal. I always like to make sure that I'm in the country, in the place where I'm meant to vote, because I know the difference that voting can make. You know, the people that are in government, they choose, and they choose the way we basically govern for the next 5 years. And what that means, I mean, going down to the basics, it's lights, water, safety, you know, you being able to park your car and it being safe. I mean, simple things like that are so affected by politics that it's like, if you liken it like this, if you have a company and you have someone really smart, somebody well educated running your company, you'd feel much more confident. But at the moment, we have a lot of incompetence running our company, our country, and I think for the first time, you're seeing a lot of people just had enough. So I think they really want to vote out our current party. They want change, and it goes across the board. The wealthy, the poor, the middle class, everybody wants a great government, and you're seeing that, I think, across the country. Everyone I know is really excited to vote, and I think it's going to make a difference. I think it's going to be very interesting because for the first time, the ruling party for the last 30 years might very well be out of power. And I think it's going to be a very exciting time in our country, a lot of change. In India, it took about 74, 75 years for Mahatma Gandhi's party to be ruled out. In our country, could have taken 30 years. And let's see, inshallah. Hopefully, we have great leaders that will take us into the future, leaders that will guide our economy and make a positive difference, inshallah. We want good leaders, clean leaders, and leaders that'll take us into the future, inshallah.
Inshallah. That's all what we hope for. It's Radio ALANSAAR on 90.4 and 105.6. It is just about 3 minutes to the hour of 9 o'clock, and you're in a special election broadcast. We have an array of guests here, and Brother Yunus Sakur is eagerly awaiting to speak to one of our guests. Brother Yunus.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to this Election 24 special edition. Not News in Focus. We're going to continue for the rest of the week because there's extreme enthusiasm on the election process. Before the break, we had Andre Duvenage, who gave us some very interesting observations and comments, and at the same time, he also indicated to us what his projections are. And I've interviewed Andre on previous occasions, and he's plus minus 5% accurate. But I have live in the studio with me our regular guest, our economist, our chartered accountant, Brother Hassan Mutala. Hassan, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this special edition Election 2024.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good to be here, Yunus. It's a fantastic day, in fact.
And later on in the program, we're going to chat with you and Shabir about your financial projections post-elections and how we're going to help to stimulate the economy.
Sure.
But I understand that I invited you, but you were in the queue.
Yeah.
In Hartley Road, and the queue was so big, and you said you can't miss this interview, so you're here, but you haven't voted. Can you explain to us, because we were talking about the enthusiasm of voters, and I know Andre gave us some scenarios that why that has taken place, but it's becoming clear that people are still in the queues in so-called the minority areas. So what's happening in Hartley Road primary, Hassan?
I'll tell you what, it's actually, when you go back to 1994, that was obviously the first elections. It is probably very, very close replica of what happened then. If you look at the numbers across the board, you take a drive anywhere throughout Overport, Musgrave, Morningside, you can go up to Reservoir Hill, Springfield, all these areas. Majority of the stations have been packed throughout the day. They've been consistently, lines snaking around the corner everywhere, and the enthusiasm and the buzz, you've never seen it for a long, long time. And I think the important part is there's a couple of important parts. Firstly, I think it's the first time in a long, long time that voter apathy has taken a bit of a backseat, and you're finding that there's an increased enthusiasm in wanting to participate and wanting to make a mark in who we're choosing for government. I think what's happened in the last number of years, whether it's the last 5, 10, 15 years in particular, has created a massive awareness amongst voters to try and make a difference and make a change. Secondly, globally, what has happened? If you look at what's happened, obviously in Palestine, 7 months ago, there would have been many voters, I'm sure, that are now in the line that have decided, let's carry on as normal and don't worry about who we're voting for or not. I think they're making a point to go out there and vote for particular parties that are in line with their principles and their humanity and their moral objectives. And you are seeing that coming through. I mean, Hartley Road, I went there thrice today. I went there after Zohar Salah, after Asr Salah, and I just came from there now. The lines there are minimum between 2 to 3 hours you will be waiting before you place your mark. So it's not something where, you throughout, generally you'll say, okay, well, the afternoon or the lunchtime and morning, it's a busy
gets
period.
quiet,
But after Maghrib, generally you'll say, okay, well, things will ease off now because it's, evening time, people are having some. The lines got bigger after Maghrib.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
So are you going to make your mark this evening? That's the big question.
I'm gonna try my best. We'll see. Obviously, depending if it's still open or if it's still. But they're not. I can tell you now, they will not finish off with the last voter before 11 o'clock tonight.
Wow.
Guaranteed they will not be. When I saw that line literally 20 minutes ago, I can tell you it's going to be a long time before they finish off with the last voter.
Wow. So lots of reports coming through as well with various stations. I believe Umhlanga was absolutely packed today as well. And another listener saying that they voted in Musgrave and it was crazy packed, as they put it. So as you heard from the voice notes as well, lots of optimism, lots of people going and taking to the polling stations as well and standing and braving those queues. Durban North, 3 hours, in Verulam, as you heard, a good few hours that people had to do. Some of us were lucky, alhamdulillah, we got through very, very quickly. But this really shows you, Brother Hassan, how important this election is. And as you mentioned as well, it's of utmost importance that, people show up and have their voice heard. And I think that's what they're exercising today, just having their voice heard.
Remember, this is the first time in this new democracy that there's a probability or a reasonable probability that the ruling party gets below 50%. Right. There's a reasonable probability of that. And it's obviously created a huge amount of hype and a huge amount of awareness around that. Secondly, this is the first time, in any country you go globally, where have you seen a party that was developed literally 5 months ago, 6 months ago, that came out and potentially could have such a significant impact, particularly in this province? Nowhere in the world you would have seen a party that is less than 6 months old having that particular impact in a provincial and potentially national election as well. That's again another impact. So I think there's a lot of, and thirdly, the true colors of many of the Zionist pro-Zionist parties have come out to the fore over the last couple of months. That again creates, for the first time in a long time, the Western Cape potentially going below 50% for the Democratic Alliance. That again creates another challenge and another coalition. So the unfortunate thing around this is that there's going to be potentially more coalitions, potentially nationally, but definitely on the provincial front, there will be coalitions that will be taking place. Unfortunately, coalitions haven't proven to be very, very effective in terms of governance as well. I'm of the optimistic view that while there's been many commentators over the last couple of months and the like that have written off the ANC, I think the ANC, do not be surprised nationally. Closer to, anywhere between 45 to 50 is a reasonable probability, I think, of the ANC. If they do get that, I think potentially, and Shabir and I can chat about it later in terms of for the stability of the country and the economy and the like going forward, that will be, I think, a good scenario for the country, because it means continuity of policy, continuity of familiar faces, and potentially more reform and probably market sort of friendly reforms coming through over the next couple of years.
That's what our analysts had pointed out, that initially it was before the country had went to the polls, basically putting the ANC's number at around 42-43%. But given the fact of the high voter turnout and about 3 million extra, people coming out at the polling stations, they now have adjusted that to about 47-48%, and maybe even close to 50%. So you're right, that does it's very telling for continuity, and I think that's what many people are looking at as well. That for the prosperity of the country, they rather have the same people in charge. But of course, whether that happens, is another thing to be seen, because coalition politics, we've seen it working on a local level, so to speak, like in Johannesburg and in other metros. But how effective would it be? What would a coalition government look like on a national level?
Sure. I think there's a few scenarios. If the ANC gets above 45%, say between 45 and 50, the scenario would be probably a favorable scenario where they will work with 2 or 3 smaller parties, and IFP potentially, there's a couple of smaller parties that they could work with and get to the 50%. Parties that would be very amicable, easy to work with, and will largely be follow the lines of the ANC's policies, and that will be a first case scenario. This is obviously excluding that the ANC doesn't get 50 and 50 plus 1 or whatever it may be. The other scenario is a 42 or 43 or 40, whatever, say between 40 and 45. Sometimes you may have to work now with a larger party. Say even 40, say let's assume a 40%. There's effectively 2 large parties, although an MK is still an unknown. But assume the 2 large parties that you have to potentially work with is the EFF and the Democratic Alliance. If you're working with an EFF, from a policy and economic stability perspective, we will come under massive pressure. Let us make no mistake about that. You would see the Rand potentially going to 25 Rand against the dollar. You could see our bond yields moving from 12% to 14, 15%. There would be a lot of negative sentiment, particularly what we've seen in the last month. And the market's telling us that they're expecting a favorable outcome of the elections by the ANC gaining between 45, 50 and above. The Rand strengthened from 19 Rand not too long ago, went down to close to 18, is now around 1830, 1840. But it strengthens quite a bit over the last 2-3 weeks. Secondly, in last week's auction of government bonds, you had 4 times oversubscribed the number of participants in the government issue bonds that came out last week. First time in a long time you've seen that. That's telling you foreigners all of a sudden are seeing some optimism in South Africa and the potential outcome of this. Obviously, whether it happens or not, we don't know, but they're seeing something which maybe we're not even picking up, but they're seeing something. So the expectations is that you will get that out. Now, an EFF type of outcome with the coalition with the government, with the ANC, would be a very leftist and socialist type of an outcome. That means policies will not be market friendly, not market palatable. With the result, we will come under pressure. We will face a lot of pressure, both from an investment perspective, but the issue is also from the private sector investment. We've had, at least in the last 18 months, the biggest issue we've had in the last 10 years is the lack of private sector FDI in certain areas of this country. But in the last 2-3 years, you've seen an uptick in terms of private sector, where particularly look at alternative energy investments. This load shedding impact, yes, load shedding, we can argue and we can talk, we can see whether tomorrow load shedding starts or not, whatever it may be. The fact of the matter is this year, is that alternative energy output and the capacity is increasing and will continue to increase over the next couple of months because of public-private partnerships and the fact that the private sector in particular and households have installed a significant amount. Now, private sector does it when there's confidence. And when they have confidence in government and policy and the like, they will do that. That will fall away if you have an EFF and an ANC coalition. The other potential coalition that could take place is the ANC and the DA. Now, there's a pro and a con here. The pro is the market will like it. The market will like it because Democrat Alliance is viewed as a very pro-capitalist and a very market-friendly type of policies they drive. And they will obviously encourage a lot more foreign investment and private sector type of investment. The negative is obviously policies around foreign policy, policies around the poor and infrastructure, particularly the poor. I think there will be major kickbacks and challenges around that. Our foreign policy will come. Remember, remember sitting in the tip of Africa, a small country, was the first to go up against the major powers and take the biggest Zionist entities in the world, take them on in the world stage.
To court. Yeah.
Which other country did that? And you're a small country in the tip of Africa to do that.
Yeah.
But if you have the Democratic Alliance as now your coalition partner, it becomes a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging to do that. Look, I think those are the two scenarios. I think if it's where you're getting a 40% or below type of scenario for the ANC, and it's those two partners. No, I was
just going to say that there were rumors of overtures made by the DA, toward the ANC in terms of being coalition partners, but that seems highly unlikely, because of the ANC's more alignment with the EFF and MK policies, perhaps. But is it at all possible that these two major political parties could come together?
Look, worst case, if it does happen at 40%, inshallah it doesn't. But in case it does, say it does have at 40%, and they do work with the DA or EFF, my view is that, look, it could go either way. But Ramaphosa will be under massive pressure. He will be under huge pressure. If you're working with the EFF, he's out. Paul Mashatile will be your next president, and Julius Malema will be your next deputy president. That's a guaranteed scenario if the ANC had to work with the EFF in that scenario. If they work with the DA, Ramaphosa will remain as president of this country. And that's a scenario, if he had to do, he will probably push as much as possible towards that type of alliance rather than the EFF. So let's hope, inshallah, we don't get there. And it's, ANC is getting 45% plus, because it creates a lot more stability. Remember, we cannot have, we in KZN, we saw, some instability with the July 2021 riots. We're still in the hotbed because we've got the unknown party being the MK still here. We don't know how they're going to, there's so many different scenarios playing, so many different predictions of the MK coming out. But it's fair to say that the MK is going to have a reasonable showing, particularly on the provincial side. And they will have an impact in terms of the provincial government and how the coalition takes place here. Nationally, we hope that it's a case of just the ANC and having to deal with one or two smaller parties to get across the line, and that it's hopefully business as usual, as in policy implementation and reform that has taken some momentum over the last year or so, that continues going forward over the next few years.
Thanks a lot. Before you come in, Sumaya, I'll get you in this now. Hassan, just to notify you that news that's coming through is that the IC will not extend the voting time beyond 9 p.m. Those that are in the queue, they will be allowed to vote. If you had somebody waiting in the queue for you, maybe that can work. I'm not sure what's going to happen then.
Sure.
But they're not planning to have a second day of elections. That's clear because they want to finalize by Sunday. But I noticed from the comments Hassan is making, and I will bring Shabir in quickly before I ask Sumaya to ask a few questions. There's a lot of positive sentiment, notwithstanding the concerns about MK and other parties and the ANC's involvement in the Gaza issue through the IDF setup or through ICJ. But the positive sentiment in Iran has significantly improved, and then other indicators are coming through. Shabir, you being in the financial sector, obviously you must be noticing the positive sentiment. From your point of view, are there any clear indicators why that is happening? Do they see South Africa as a positive area for investment? Do they believe the ANC will still be in control, even though they may not get the majority with a small coalition? And that is the important part, that nationally the ruling party is still in control, and they have a renewal policy and really trying to deal with all the challenges they've had. Shabir?
I think the one issue is that we're all hoping for stability and continuity. I think where you have uncertainty, that rattles the markets quite significantly. So I think what Hassan has mentioned about the rand improving, but it depends on so many other issues, international issues, etc. And sometimes it's difficult to ascertain what's the main reasons for it, because something happens in America, they don't increase rates, etc. That will have an impact on the rand. There is some optimism. We note that when the rand strengthens, the level of activity increases significantly, because you get our businessmen and women holding on to make payments, and once the rand improves, the trading room is extremely busy. So to some extent, there is some optimism on that basis, and we're hoping that will kind of continue. And if it does, I think it augurs well. But let's see what happens, as the professor has mentioned earlier, this time tomorrow, whether we get indications as to what the
we'll follow that very carefully. So maybe you wanted to come in one issue about investments.
Since Mr. Mutala and Mr. Chauhan are talking about economy and investments, there's a widespread belief amongst investors that the stock, bonds and the rand will keep soaring after today's election, hitting commodity prices, boost the exports that South Africa's economy have. On the flip side, investors have changed their minds about South Africa, which has suffered from years of power outages, poor economic growth and mismanagement. So these are from investors abroad. So which one is going to weigh more?
Let's defer that to Hussein, because he's the expert on this. Sure. I think probably he can give an answer on that.
I think if you look at, so from a foreigner's perspective, South Africa hasn't had much foreign direct investment coming to the country for a long time. We look at it firstly, foreign direct investment in terms of bricks and mortar, and then secondly in terms of the financial stock market being your stocks and bonds. Stocks and bonds over the last 10 years has been very negative from a foreigner investor. Foreigners have been net sellers of our stock market and of our bonds, particularly over the last 5 years. We've had billions outflowing out of our country over the last 5 years in the stock market and the bond market. However, from a foreign direct investment, we've seen in the last few years, there's been an increase and an uptick in that. I'll give you numbers. So you've had foreign direct inflows in 2021, 595 billion rands in South Africa, the largest we've seen in the last 15 years. 2022, 151 billion, 2023, 97 billion. So you're finding that there has been an uptick. Obviously, some of that's corporate activity where somebody's buying another company and the likes, so that happens. But you are seeing bricks and mortar, that people are investing in plants and new capacity. Look at the motor industry, for example, in the Eastern Cape and the like. There's increasing capacity coming through from some of the big auto producers that are increasing their plants so that they produce and export to other parts of the world as well. You are seeing it, for example, in KZN. We're seeing potentially a big resort that's coming up on the north coast.
Tillymanus side, yeah.
Tillymanus side. There's a new resort that's coming up there. There's also the likes of your sugar producers and the like that are putting, and the paper producers that are putting in increasing capacity. That's telling you that there's still optimism and sort of expectations that South Africa can do well. But even more optimistic, the biggest e-commerce company in the world has now just opened in South Africa this past month.
Right.
Amazon. Amazon. Okay, we can talk about Temu, Shein, and Tencent. They're massive as well. But Amazon's taking on, obviously, our homegrown Take-A-Lot. But Amazon is the biggest e-commerce company in the world. And they've set up shop. Not that they haven't been around. They've been around in South Africa, mainly on the cloud services side. They've got big operations already in Cape Town, and they're setting up a massive campus and the like in Cape Town as we talk. But they're setting up and they view South Africa as a long-term investment opportunity. Now, if you're getting companies of the likes of Amazon and the like coming through and say, hold on, we're having faith, we're putting bricks and mortar and infrastructure and putting our money in here, I think that gives confidence also to local investors, local companies, and you will see the benefit of that. South Africa potentially You go back over the 30 years, 1994 through to 1999, when you had Nelson Mandela's era.
Right.
It was a very stable focus on trying to get fiscal stability and bringing in calm and peace and all of the like. When President Mbeki came in if you look at the era from 1998 through to 2008, it was South Africa's best economic growth period in many years. During the 10 years when President Mbeki was around. Obviously, we benefited from the commodity price boom that had taken place during that period. But we had stability, we had fiscal growth, we had unemployment went to lows. We were a booming economy, and very importantly, people always lambaste. I'm not batting for the ANC. Don't get me wrong, but people lambaste the ANC because what has really happened in the last 15 years. But if you look at the first 15 years, there was increase of water supply, there was increase of housing, there was increase of electricity, there was increase of toilets, of normal toilets, not the split toilets and the like. There was increase of those basic services and human rights for the majority of this country. And that was a big improvement that we had seen in the first 15 years.
Wow.
Obviously, the last 15 years, the corruption and the like,
state capture and everything.
The like, it washed away, or it sort of took away the shine of what had happened. But I think they could be some renewed optimism that if we have this the ANC under Ramaphosa over the next 5 years, that we could see a period of 5 years of much better economic growth than what we've seen over the last 10 years.
Very interesting. And if I bring in Mr. Chauhan here, we had Hassan talking about the optimism, and clearly, of course, big companies like Amazon coming to South Africa and expressing optimism. You, of course, working closely with the community, big businesses within our community as well. Why is it that we find that there's always this tone of pessimism as opposed to optimism? We know when we gather on family gatherings around the dinner table or so, there's always this pessimistic tone that's taken with regards to the business outlook that we're experiencing in the country at the moment. And why do we find that is the case? And how can we change it to adopt the optimism which Hassan has just pointed to?
I think everyone is just used to complaining. If you have a look at it, I think yes, things are tight in the country. If you have a look at we call it profit rates, the interest rates from the conventional banks, the consumers are being squeezed, etc. It is having an impact on businesses. But saying that, there are certain businesses that are doing extremely well. And remember, as businesses, especially the community that we're dealing with, they're very resilient. If you have a look at what happened in 2021, I think people have recovered from that quite significantly. I think South Africans, we used to dealing with a lot of adversity. We go across and yes, we complain, but yet we make things happen. We make a plan, we'll come out of it. And that's the nature of this. So I think going forward, yes, there has been some people holding back what's going to happen with the elections. But right. I don't think in my interaction with the businesses that we're involved in, although people say that, in reality, they will still go ahead. They'll talk about it. And I think sometimes it's also the media where people start portraying negative news, trying to create problems, trying to create issues, etc. But I think where we are, and just kind of picking up on what Hassan has mentioned, we've got a lot of potential in this country.
Right.
We've got significant opportunities, and I think it's going to be our job now to take this whole process forward. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
South Africa is in trouble. I mean, the South African national accounts are in serious trouble and have become unsustainable with the debt of between 75% and 90% of the GDP.
It's actually not significantly problematic. There's other countries that have got worse ratios than that. So it's yes, there's when you look at it in that respect, it might be problematic. But I don't think we're in major problems as such. When you have a look at the revenue collection that's in place, the additional income that the South African Revenue Services that still can go and collect I think I saw Yunus's article. I think he mentioned about it with the township economy, getting more people into the net. If we get it right, there's one key word. I think let's get the corruption out of the way, get proper governance in place, and put all that into place. It's going to be, well, I still believe it's one of the best countries. Yes, if people want to immigrate, they'll always talk down on people in South Africa and whatever, but we're going to be staying out here. And we've got plans, when I say we, the community as such, to go across and make it happen.
So would you say government pension is safe?
I would think so.
Okay, so
I think
so
you got
everything
no problem with that. Just continue saving it out there.
Okay, I think just to conclude this topic quickly, bringing it home within our own communities in respect of our local entrepreneurs, it's a difficult time for some businesses, some business owners that are South African. You know, they must deal not only with the sluggish global economy, disruptive military conflicts around the world, but also with an uncertain economic and political outlook here at home. What would you say to the businessman or businesswoman sitting at home right now, listening in, fearful about the results?
I'll go first and maybe. So I think sometimes people are very concerned about uncertainty. They'll go across and you'll listen to the pundits. They'll tell you about MK and they'll tell you about political parties. Remember, we've probably been through worse in South Africa. We lived through apartheid before 1994. And even now, when you look at through all the kind of problems that we've had, we've still recovered from that. As I indicated, we're resilient. And when you're looking at smaller businesses, the thing is, go across, try to keep your overheads as low as possible. There's a lot of opportunities. And I think with technology coming in, with the level of digitalization taking place, there's opportunities to compete with bigger institutions. I mean, I'm going to take our institution, small financial institution. What digitalization is doing is allowing us to compete with the bigger players. We don't have 600 branches in the country, but we've got the internet access, we've got the apps, we can open up accounts that we don't have to be in places. I mean, when you look at it, that probably applies to every single business out there. When you have a look at what they can do with e-commerce, go across, come up with dealing not just with people in Durban, people in the country, and people throughout the world as such, if they're just doing e-commerce. So I think to answer the question is to just focus on the key issues, stick to the knitting, don't get too involved with those kind of aspects. In terms of worrying about the problem areas, but rather focus on the opportunities, because believe me, there's quite a lot. We are a powerhouse on the African continent, and there's still a significant amount of opportunities for various businesses. It's just a matter of finding out which is the best for that.
All right, it is now coming on to 29 minutes past the hour of 9 o'clock. We'll take a quick ad break and we'll continue this riveting discussion on our elections 2024.
Is sponsored by Ashraful Aid, International Humanitarian Organization.
حديث أدي قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, leave out those things which are doubtful for those that are not doubtful. If a person is in doubt about whether something is permissible or not, he should stay away from it. Use only things that are not doubtful. Stay away from doubtful foods. Do not eat such food which you are not sure of.
This hadith is sponsored by Ashraful Aid, International Humanitarian Organization.
Looking to fulfill your Qurbani obligations conveniently? Look no further than Ashraful Aid, with prices starting at 950 Rand in Malawi and 2,000 Rand for a share in South Africa. We take care of everything, from slaughtering to packaging and distribution to those in need. Make your Qurbani meaningful with Ashraful Aid. Visit our website at ashrafulaid.org.
Sunnah a Day, proudly brought to you by Sunpick, 100% pure sunflower cooking oil. Sunpick, cook more with less.
सुन्नत तेरी दुनिया दी
sunnah a day. If food falls onto the floor, it should be picked up, cleaned and eaten. It should not be left for shaitan.
Sunnah a day. Proudly brought to you by Sunpick. 100% pure sunflower cooking oil. Sunpick. Cook more with less.
Imagine this. You're putting together a 7-color meal, from the creamy pasta to the glazed carrots and flavorful onion gravy. This entire meal is made with our 100% pure extra virgin olive oil from our La Familia range, bringing outstanding quality and taste to your kitchen. Shop La Familia 100% pure extra virgin olive oil at any leading supermarkets near you. La Familia, heart of the home.
Radio ALANSAAR, 24/7, 365.
حسبي ربي جل الله في قلبي غير الله محمد صلى الله لا إله إلا الله حسبي ربي جل الله في قلبي غير الله محمد صلى الله لا إله إلا الله تیرے صدقے میں آقا سارے جہاں کو دین ملا بے دینوں نے کلمہ پڑھا لا الہ الا اللہ تیرے صدقے میں آقا سارے جہاں کو دین ملا بے دینوں نے کلمہ پڑھا لا الہ الا اللہ حسبی ربی جل اللہ فی قلبی غیر اللہ محمد صلی اللہ لا الہ الا اللہ حسبی ربی جل اللہ فی قلبی غیر اللہ محمد صلی اللہ لا الہ الا اللہ سمت نبی بو جہل گیا آقا سے اس نے یہ کہا سمت نبی بو جہل گیا آقا سے اس نے یہ کہا گر ہو نبی بتلاؤ ذرا میری مٹھی میں ہے کیا سمت نبی بو جہل گیا آقا سے اس نے یہ کہا گر ہو نبی بتلاؤ ذرا میری مٹھی میں ہے کیا آقا کا فرمان ہوا اور فضل رحمان ہوا مٹھی سے پتھر بولا لا الہ الا اللہ حسبی ربی جل اللہ فی قلبی غیر اللہ محمد صلی اللہ لا الہ الا اللہ حسبی ربی جل اللہ فی قلبی غیر اللہ محمد صلی اللہ لا الہ الا اللہ وہ جو بلال حبشی ہے سروردی کا پیارا ہے وہ جو بلال حبشی ہے سروردی کا پیارا ہے دنیا کے ہر عاشق کی آنکھوں کا وہ تارا ہے وہ جو بلال حبشی ہے سروردی کا پیارا ہے دنیا کے ہر عاشق کی آنکھوں کا وہ تارا ہے ظلم ہوئے کتنے اس پر سینے پر رکھا پتھر لب پر پھر بھی جاری تھا لا الہ الا اللہ حسبی ربی جل اللہ فی قلبی قلبي غير الله محمد صلى الله لا إله إلا الله حسبي ربي جل الله ما في قلبي غير الله محمد صلى الله لا إله إلا الله اپنی بہن سے بولے عمر یہ تو بتا کیا کرتی تھی اپنی بہن سے بولے عمر یہ تو بتا کیا کرتی تھی میرے آنے سے پہلے کیا چھپ کے پڑھتی تھی اپنی بہن سے بولے عمر یہ تو بتا کیا کرتی تھی میرے آنے سے پہلے کیا چھپ کے پڑھتی تھی بہن نے جب قرآن پڑھا سن کے کلام پاک خدا دل یہ عمر کا بول اٹھا لا الہ الا اللہ حسبی ربی جل اللہ ما فی قلبی غیر اللہ محمد صلی اللہ لا الہ الا اللہ حسبی ربی جل اللہ ما فی قلبی غیر اللہ محمد صلی اللہ لا الہ الا اللہ دنیا کے انسان سبھی شرک و بدعت کرتے تھے دنیا کے انسان سبھی شرک و
لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك
میٹھا میٹھا پیارا مدینہ میٹھا میٹھا پیارا مدینہ 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 مدینے چلا میں مدینے چلا میں مدینے چلا میں مدینے چلا میں مدینے چلا مدینہ مدینے چلا مدینے